Is there a supplementary agenda?
No, there is not.
Okay, disclosures of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, for open session agenda items and the general nature thereof. Seeing none, we'd love to now do a recognition, check presentation by Greenfield Global to the municipality of Chatham-Kent for the Round the River Trail.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vesely Nikolov. I'm a plant manager at Greenfield Global in Chatham. It's a big honor for me to be here with you tonight and to make this presentation. Greenfield has been part of this community for decades, and it will continue being part of this community for the next decades. And this is just a small contribution the company can make for Chatham-Kent community. Tonight, I'm going to present the check for $50,000, which is going to be first of 5 installments for the river trail, which is going to support the community and the health and the development of it. Thank you.
Next item, planning.
Planning meeting process. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. The application will be announced by name of applicant, the type of application, the municipal file number, and its location. The mayor will ask if there is anyone present other than the applicant or his or her agent with an interest in the application, and to indicate so by raising their hand. If there is no one present indicating an interest in the application, council will proceed as follows. There will be no presentation by administration. Administration will be asked if they wish to make any additional comments regarding the report or recommendations. Council will be asked if it has any questions of administration. The applicant will be asked if he or she has any comments. Administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. Council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the application. If someone other than the applicant or the applicant's agent indicates an interest in the application, council will proceed as follows. Administration will present the report. Council will be asked if it has any questions of administration. Individuals or their agent present with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name and address council with their comments, concerns, or questions. Council will be asked if it has any questions of each presenter. The applicant will be asked if he or she has any comments. Council will be asked if it has any questions of the applicant. Administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. Council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the application. Notice: if any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk of the corporation of the municipality of Chatham-Kent before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Notice of passing. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website, www.chatham-kent.ca. All persons receiving notice of this meeting will receive a notice of the passing of a bylaw relating to any of the planning applications presented here tonight, if approved, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of passing or a notice of council's decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk.
(8A) Planning application for consent, Henry Heineck Excavating Limited, 300 Grand Ave East, Community of Chatham City.
Is the applicant, his or her agent, present? If so, please raise your hand. The applicant is noted as being present. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, does the administration have any additional comments regarding the report or recommendation?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. There are no comments.
Does council have any questions? What action would council like to take with regard to the application? Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I would like to move the recommendations 1, A, B. You don't want me to read all of these, right? Okay, good. A, B, C, D, E, and F. I so move.
Councillor Bondi?
I'll second it. Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Any questions? Put to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 8B, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Trueland Construction Limited, 12 James Street, Community of Chatham City.
Is the applicant, his or her agent, present? If so, please raise your hand. The applicant is noted as not being present. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, does the administration have any additional comments regarding the report or recommendations?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. No additional comments.
Does council have any questions? Seeing none, what action would council like to take? Councillor B. McGregor?
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Crew, seconder. Any questions? Let's put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Okay, next agenda item, deputations.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Tonight we have 2 deputations for items on current agenda. I'll remind both speakers you have a maximum of 5 minutes and the timer will be on the screen. First speaker is Dr. Henry Sevek with regards to item 15A, Council Compensation Report. On deck will be Harry Lawson.
Thank you. Thank you to Judy Smith and the clerk and all of you for letting me come today. I'm quite surprised that council would consider a recommendation that, should they vote and agree with administration, would result in a financial gain to each of you personally. I and the public are wondering how a council can decide such a matter, when in other instances they must recuse themselves when such an outcome of a relationship exists, where they would experience personal financial gain as a result of a decision they make. There may be a legal loophole for this action, but please consider the perception you are creating if you do agree with this recommendation. Here are the other reasons why we feel that this recommendation should not be considered by this council. Obviously, you can ignore my comments and say no to all this stuff, but before you do, let me throw these at you. While they should be commended for their efforts, the group recommending this was not a citizen committee that equally reflected the will of the rural citizens, particularly those engaged in business, micro-business, or agricultural business outside of Chatham City. The corporation of the municipality of Chatham-Kent is not financially sustainable, and self-approving a pay raise of 15.5% for councillors and 17% for the mayor suggests that in future negotiations with employee groups, consultants hired by the municipality, and administration compensation, it will do do as I say, not as I do for council. How can council ask others to sacrifice if they will not? Our property taxes present an impediment to growth, attraction of youth and business in our communities, and this recommendation will only increase that. Council should take up this matter 3.5 years from now when they're not personally impacted by this decision. Voting for their own personal enrichment and gain today should not be represented as the example to the public of current council integrity and ethical practice. This recommendation was again brought forth to council by administration, as I understand it. This appears to be very similar to the successful attempt by administration to overthrow a decision made by council led by Councillor Thompson with regard to a speed limit change on the 8th line. We ask our elected councillors to set policy, not administration. Now, I totally understand that you may say no to this request, but please give me a few seconds to finish. Should council wish to vote on this recommendation, I would ask that you turn it down and please consider a pay decrease of 10% each year for the next 4 years and introduce a separate motion to do so. It would help us see that you are serious about the difficult budget decisions you will have to make in the next few weeks, and it is about leading by example and doing what you say, doing what you do, not what you say. Work as a team, please, and turn down this recommendation. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Speck.
Next speaker is Harry Lawson on item 14B, which is committee recommendations, bridges and culverts.
Mayor Caniff and councillors, I'm Harry Lawson. I'm once again here tonight representing the Kent Federation of Agriculture to provide to council our comments on the Infrastructure, Bridges, Culverts, and Road Innovation Committee's report to council. This report lists a number of recommendations. The only time the word innovation is in the report is in recommendation number 7, which is to hire someone to manage R&D projects. We consider that recommendation to be premature at the very least. This is the Innovation Committee where this report's coming from. One definition of innovation is to break with tradition. The mandate of this committee is to consider how Chatham-Kent can innovate and optimize investments in bridges, roads, and culverts. In order to fulfill that mandate, the committee needs to look beyond Chatham-Kent's borders and investigate what's out there. Under the procurement heading of the report, Tendering versus Design Build, the investigation went no further than the opinion of staff. We're not aware of anyone with actual experience interacting with that committee. Alternate sourcing is also received little examination, hardly a break with tradition. There are 7 recommendations in this report. Our advice to council is that the report be received with the exclusion of number 5. Number 5 is not innovation, it's an admission of failure. Number 5 is the recommendation to investigate closing roads and bridges. Every property owner in Chatham-Kent is assessed municipal property taxes to compensate the municipality for services provided. Divesting roads and bridges reduces the services to that local community and transfers the cost of municipal services to landowners who pay taxes to the municipality for those same services. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Number 10, consent agenda. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda and placed aside for consideration and debate separately? Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to pull 10A6, please.
10A6, okay. Any other items? Councillor Thompson.
Item 10A3, I believe.
10A3?
Physician recruitment and retention. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. Also, 10A4, Chatham-Kent Summer Day Camp and Playground Programs.
Okay. Councillor C. McGregor. 10A7. Any others? I'm not sure there is. 1 and 2. Okay, so we get a motion to accept 1 and 2. Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Finn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Oche, 10A6.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Jeff Bray or Thomas Kelly. I would like to know what Chatham-Kent has done to try to, besides cut ice time and raise ice rates, what we've done to try to keep the ice busier. Like, have we, I know at Christmas we ran a special, I believe, on ice time, which is great, but kind of bothers me as well, because I'd like to know why we're giving somebody, say I wanted to rent the ice one time this year, so I get a great rate, but people that have rented the ice every weekend or one night a week, every week, that while the ice is in, gets no break at all. So I guess I just don't understand their logic in that. If we're and we only do it for 1 week, what about all the open ice that's available at other times? We don't seem to be doing anything for that at all.
Presently, thank you, through Mayor Caniff, we're presently following the ICE policy, user policy. We are going to do a business plan on arena ice rental this year, and these are we're looking at different options of available ice time to users.
Okay. Another problem I have in this is up to 2016, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. If that's what I read, because I know Wheatley's figure skating is up from what it says in here. So I don't like that we're using a 2-year-old report. And the fact also that what I don't like is that we've had a meeting in Wheatley, and we told the people there and the residents and the users of the arena that we would not be talking about cutting ice until at least June, and this is out already. But it's also in the budget already as a $20,000 savings by cutting ice time. How is it that we've already got that in the budget if we haven't even talked about this till June?
It's not in the budget. That's up for budget deliberation for 2019-2020. But you are correct. From our meeting in Wheatley, we're not cutting ice time until then. It's status quo.
So 2019, which is the fall of this year, when ice is back in.
Next season.
So we have, or I shouldn't say someone has already spoken about cutting this ice before June, obviously, if it's in the budget to be cut already.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves with a budget item, but to answer that, we're not cutting. What we're doing is consolidating hours. The arena, I don't know if this is the right forum to get into a budget item at this point, but we're just looking at consolidating hours with available staff time. The proposed cut that you've seen in the budget is extremely small. It's just so that we can consolidate hours.
So we're not losing any ice time hours, is that
That's
what you're
correct, saying? Yeah. It's more efficiencies with staff.
So we'll still have a staff on that we have on now for all the ice rentals?
That is correct, and if the arena is closed on a certain day, subject to council approval, and someone does want to rent time, we'll do everything within our available staff allocations to make sure that happens.
Okay, because I did have a message that somebody would like to rent it in the mornings, but we're unable to do that for them at the moment. Maybe that will change as well coming up. So,
sorry, Councillor, is that recently that happened? They were unable to
I got the message yesterday, or
okay.
Sorry, I don't have it with me here to.
Yeah. It's important that staff get those so we can see what the issue is and what we can do for the person.
Okay. Okay. So no hours being cut in Wheatley, and this is 2016, though, isn't it? So what I read in this report says that it's from 2012 to 2016. Is that correct?
2017. The hours that we used to crunch the numbers was to 2017, I believe.
Chatham-Kent continues to experience a decline in numbers of residents who historically have engaged in arena-based activities. From 2011 to 2016. The following age cohorts experienced the following declines.
I'm sorry, I thought you were referring to one of the matrices in the appendix. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, do we know what it is now? Since this is now 2019, we should have 2017 by now, I would think.
Yeah, we will have the 2018 numbers shortly. At year end.
So some of this could be a little bit off, preferably in the better.
The numbers, I guess, a little off, but there is a trend that you can see with a steady decline.
Well, I definitely know Wheatley, figure skating has gone up from this report for sure.
It's important to note too, with some of the numbers, we can only base them on CK residents through the user policy, even though some of the that's a good example that you just cited with the figure skating, is that they do get some people joining that are outside of the municipality. So their numbers may show increases, but we can only see what the actual CK residents are within the association.
And why would that be? And I apologize. The reason I ask is I know there's people coming from Harrow, Kingsville, and Leamington to skate in Wheatley.
Well, historically, the user policy, when ice was difficult to book, we wanted to make sure that CK residents got the ice before people who weren't residents. So we just tallied, so we would just contact when we did delegate the ice time, based on how many residents there were, they got so many hours of ice. There's a formula within the user policy. So now that's not an issue with a lot of the arenas, and that's another policy that we're going to be looking at this year to revamp. So people are welcome to come in. We don't have that problem where people are scrambling for prime and even the secondary ice. So anyone can come in and book it. Say Wheatley's a good example for that.
Okay, so that 53% could be way off because of the fact that we are having people come from Harrow, Kingsville, and Leamington. I don't understand why we can't just get their, we know the figure skating would have everybody's address and everything, so we should be able to really say, well, you know what, this is what we're looking at for real ice usage and how many people we have in the Wheatley Figure Skating Club and any figure skating club or hockey or anything else. We should be able to get all that information, whether they be residential or non-residential, to Chatham-Kent. So I'd love to see that change for sure.
We can try that moving forward. At the end of the day, though, I think it's important the number of hours actually booked within the facilities.
Yeah, but that's fine, but I don't like seeing it. Here it says since 2014, Wheatley's down 53% in their figure skating, when really they're not down 53% because they actually have quite a few people coming out of town, out of Chatham-Kent. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Understood.
Okay. So I'm sorry. You are looking at other processes of keeping people in the arena, you said, basically?
We're going to review. There's been a lot of, Mayor Caniff has done quite a few, had discussions with a lot of user groups, and there's a lot of similarities there. So we're going to look at what the concerns are, look at best practices with other jurisdictions, and just look at the targets that were set in 2015 financially. There's a balancing act there for staff between meeting our financial targets and then meeting the needs of the community. So that's going to be really the key of this business plan.
And I guess that leads me to one more question. There's really no retribution to anyone if our arenas had 1% capacity compared to 75% capacity, is there?
I'm sure I don't understand what you're...
Like, there's no responsibility, basically, I guess I would say, to anyone if we're running tons of ice or if we're not running tons of ice, other than to the taxpayers who are paying the extra, and to the people that are using the arena that are paying a higher rate than most locations in and around Chatham-Kent, such as Leamington or Guelph, Walpole Island, Bell River. There's not a motivation to say, hey, you know what, if we could hit these hours in a year, you could make, I don't know what, but there's no kind of motivation to get the arenas filled to capacity.
And this is part of the purpose of the business plan, to make the arenas more viable, whether it's a balancing act between decreased revenues, maybe different ice slots, maybe jurisdictions, new programming that we haven't investigated before.
And I'm not cutting any of the managers down, because you know what, Rob's great in Tilbury and Wheatley, and I don't know too many other ones, but I know I'm not saying that he's not doing his job, because he is doing his job. He goes above and beyond. I just want to just like you guys are thinking of ways of being able to help this, and I'm trying to think of ways as well to get our ice time back up to where it should be and that. But okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, you know, the municipality wants these facilities to be successful. We've put millions of dollars into them, over $1 million into the Wheatley one, and it just doesn't make sense for us just to let it go. It's running fine. It's up to speed. Everything's ship-shape there, so we want to see them succeed.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think this is not only a wake-up call to council, but communities and organizations that use these very important facilities, that we need to continue to use them and support them, or we'll have these difficult conversations each and every year. This report was on arena usage, but it strictly seemed to deal on ice time. Could you speak in general terms as to other uses that these arenas are getting?
Most of them are dedicated to ice time. There are supplementary uses like hall rentals. We didn't want to get into that. I just wanted to focus on the prime purpose of the facilities, which is ice bookings.
See, so from my perspective, potentially the primary focus of these facilities could be changing, and we need to be open and to at least accept that and continue to support our hockey teams and our figure skating, absolutely 100%. But we did have an organization in here, just off the top of my head, looking for a ball hockey site. And we've got arenas that seem to be hurting for a lack of usage. So to me, there's a synergy there, or a potential synergy every summer. I know the Blenheim Arena, they have an upstairs to them that they obviously rent out, I believe. That was the case, is it not still?
There's a room up there that's rented sporadically. Right. I'd say Ryder Hall in Tilbury is probably the most rented facility
Absolutely
we have.
It is. Right. So if you look at Tilbury on here, the ice time doesn't tell the whole story, because Ryder Hall gets rented out a fair bit. Also in Blenheim, I know Chris Kirkwood's based that office out of there. Is that the same for all of the arenas? Do we have like an office person or a dual usage?
I'd say all of them do have an office. The supervisors do have office facilities, except for the Chatham. Brian has his office at the PABC building.
Okay. I echo Councillor Oche's concerns, and I'm sure I'm going to echo Councillor Harrigan's concerns as well. We need to find uses for these arenas, and we need to admit to ourselves that sometimes the best thing in the budget isn't the best thing for our communities. So thank you.
Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff. A lot of my questions have already been addressed, so I will try to be brief. Something that I, in speaking with residents, have noted that has also been in decreased usage is like cash payment systems. But I know that Section 6 in the report, I believe it is, mentions booking software, and I'm wondering if you could just very briefly speak to what the end state would look like for residents once that software is fully implemented.
Thank you, through Mayor Caniff. Just a little bit of an overview for the rest of council. There's presently 3 ways people can book ice now. One is to call 1-519-360-1998 or email CK Rec Facilities. There's also a complete online request form and email to the same email address. So typically they'll get back within 24 hours of if the ice has been booked. And you can also view availability online at the same sites. We are looking at, there's a new booking software that the councillor alluded to called Perfect Mind. That's going to be rolled out in the summer at this point. That new software does have the capacity to do online bookings. So if you have a mobile device, you're at home on your computer, you'll be able to book ice on time. So we're looking at rolling that out in the 2019-2020. There's going to be a lot of lessons learned too. I don't want to set false expectations, so I can't say what type of ice initially we're going to be able to, residents will be able to book. We want to work with the user groups. This is really led by IT, so we know the capacity is there within the software. It's paid for, so we're all looking forward to rolling this out. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, thank you. Also through you, Mayor Caniff, would you say that the greatest impact on decreased usage of the arenas, you noted that like ice time, the hours are going down, is that connected more to formal sports groups bookings like minor hockeys or to community bookings and community usage?
Yes, I would say it's definitely the associations. I just have a stat here for you that bookings for minor hockey and figure skating accounted for 72% of the hours rented in 2014 and 69% in 2018. It's a slight decline, but it's definitely an influencing factor.
Okay. So I think Councillor Ochie's earlier comments about some of the increasing and expected increases with, figure skating groups, even if the residents and the registrants are outside of CK, those groups growing, we need to prepare for that because the report also mentioned Leamington closing off some of its ice, its twin pad icing. And I know in the figure skating circles, they believe that that will actually lead to an increase in the figure skating members in their club because there will be less opportunity to skate.
And I hope that's a great opportunity for us because we have the capacity for them.
And then just in closing, my last question is actually, I believe more for the CAO. It seems like there's this tension between ideas that our communities are generating around how to use the ice in the arenas. So, when this budget item came to the community, people were saying, what about birthday parties? What about, quick shinny games or registering for these sorts of things? And that's very much recreational programming. But when we have these conversations in facilities, like Jeff's mind and Thomas's mind are much more facilities, engineering, and maintenance. So can you tell me how the two come together and when they come together and if that relationship is working well or if there's opportunities there to improve so we can look at more creative programming to fill these arenas?
Thank you very much. Your worship, through your worship, the opportunities to actually have the arenas booked on a full-time basis that's certainly something that Jeff and the team are exploring. We have representatives from our recreation programming facilities here today listening to the presentation as well. So there's a number of opportunities for us. As I think Jeff's pointed out, we have some very large, expensive facilities, and the optimum utilization of those facilities is to book as much ice time as possible. So the administration is completely open to having any and all suggestions come forward. I think what we're recognizing that some of the current booking processes are cumbersome, and it doesn't allow us with the maximum flexibility to be able to book things, make sure that there's staff there to provide safety and support to the buildings. But that's certainly something we're looking above and beyond the traditional figure skating or ice hockey rentals. If we can actually put people in the facility, we are looking at a variety of activities. Mr. Kelly and I were actually had a discussion earlier today about some of the things we're exploring. So we'd ask that if council members or the members of the public have those ideas, that they be forwarded to Jeff and company, and we'll make sure that they're taken into account.
Thank you, and I think there's a good opportunity to incorporate some of those community ideas and community feedback into the business plan that's currently being drafted.
Definitely.
Okay, Councillor B. McGregor, and on deck, Councillor Solomon, then Councillor Sakachi, and then Councillor C. McGregor.
I think that means I'm supposed to keep it short, right? I just had a quick question. I sent an email earlier regarding the use of prime versus non-prime ice time. So understanding we couldn't get that information by tonight, but just wanted to reiterate that that's something that we could pull out and councillors could review and we could review with the business plan.
Yeah. Through Mayor Caniff, again, that is one of the key things that we're looking at through the business plan because, as I mentioned before, we have financial targets that are out of date, and this influences those. So that's a very strong component we'll be reviewing.
Okay, my second comment would be related to Bothwell in particular. So I know a few years ago we had a great deputation by a group from that community about increasing usage at their arena and what that meant for their community. And I would like to see in that business plan a re-engagement with that group to see what outcomes we've seen from that effort on their part, or if there's need to change resources around how they've been involved in trying to increase the usage there. And finally, I think it would be helpful.
Excuse me if I could speak to that. Sorry. That's the Bar Act group, and I've been working with them since Scott's retirement. There is a report pending, and I'd say they've been extremely busy, and they'd be an excellent model for a lot of these facilities during when ice is out. I think last year we've had them track their hours. I'm going off my memory, but I believe they had 607 hours booked with a variety of events. They had their roller skating, ball hockey, lacrosse, community events, all sorts of things. So they're a real model, I think, that we're going to engage.
Absolutely. The last thing I think would be helpful to see at some point is a comparator of unused ice rates in other municipalities, because I think we get hyper-focused on comparing arenas within the municipality, but I'm not sure what the ideal number is. So do you consider an arena full if 70% of the ice is booked? Is that considered successful, or how do we gauge that when we're looking at provincial comparators, especially when we're looking at investment in infrastructure going forward?
Definitely. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Worship. I sort of have a different tact in looking at this. The numbers are that you've got a population of a little over 100,000 and you've got 10 arenas, which explains pretty clearly why we've got overcapacity, we've got oversupply and under demand. And we look at it, and there are 2 arenas that half the time the ice isn't being used, and one almost 75% of the time the ice isn't being used. That's the real issue. And if you think you can turn that around in a population where the population is not increasing, and in fact it's aging, I wish you well in that task. But the reality of it is, I want to compliment you on what you're trying to do, because it appears to me, although maybe I'm just reading between the numbers, you're trying to keep arenas open, and you're trying to find an efficient way of doing it, because you can't have somebody there if nobody's renting the ice. It just is illogical. And there are too many that are not hitting anywhere near a target of being booked half the time. So isn't that the real problem? And and I can see you're doing your best to keep arenas open. That if it wasn't for, if you just looked at it dollars and cents, you'd say no, we can't have 10 for 100,000 people. I understand why we do, and I'm not saying anything different than that. It's just that from what I see, you're doing your best to keep arenas open, not get them closed. And one example was Ridgetown last year, where they were using, they had the, what group did
Cyclones.
You have? Yeah, you had Cyclones, that's right. I should know that since both my boys played with them. But anyway, and I was involved. But that's out in Ridgetown, and you were trying to, from what I could tell, you were trying to keep Ridgetown viable by renting out the property to the AAA team, which is the Cyclones. And so I thought you were doing a real good job of trying to keep arenas open. And this report looks the same to me, is that the numbers keep following the same trend, but you're doing your best to make sure that arenas do stay open. Am I missing something?
Through Mayor Caniff, no, you're not missing anything. And as not to repeat myself, we're looking for some creative ways to make them more viable. At this point, you're right. Things are under the current process and policies we have. Some arenas are struggling. There's no other way around it. So this is our task this year, to see if we can try something to see if we can turn that trend around.
No, I wish you well, your department well in trying to do it.
Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I guess Brock kind of already touched base on a little bit of my comment, but my comment is in regards to the correlation of the pricing that we see here in Chatham-Kent compared to the surrounding areas. I know personally of groups that are from Chatham-Kent that will drive an extra 15 minutes because of the ice time rate is so high here in Chatham-Kent. And I do understand the lifestyle component, and I also want to echo some of Councillor Solomon's. I understand that we're up against it. I know minor hockey the numbers are declining. Look at our school populations are declining, so I do understand. But I think that we're trying to balance the life cycle with the cost in that. But I also think that's detrimental to the public because we're seeing such an expensive rate in ice costs. And when you kind of bring back Brock's regards to the surrounding areas, what's your opinion in regards to our pricing being so high? Do you think that also negatively affects the bookings of our ice?
Through Mayor Caniff, I would say to the general public it is detrimental. That's anecdotal on my part. At the same time, I'm not sure if we didn't have that, we had lower ice rates, and we suddenly had an epic fail where we had a ice surface go and it cost $800,000 and we hit the general taxpayer for that. I'm not sure what their spin would be on that. We have a few facilities where the ice pads have exceeded their lifespan, and at $800,000 a pop, that's a pretty significant expenditure, and I think administration's been prudent in building up the life cycle and maintaining these facilities. So as I said, they are in top-notch shape. We can't control when an ice pad will go, but other things are really well maintained. I don't have an answer to your question, and as again, I'll loop back to the business plan to see if, and there's a number of factors that we can look at to see if it is an influencing factor.
Mayor Hope, Mayor Ken, if I could just add that really what we have here is you're going to be asked to approve the capital budget later. What our competitors are doing is that they have taken the life cycle component out and they put it in their capital budget, and we don't do that right now. So regardless, you see on the other sheet that it's just a matter of who's going to subsidize it more than the others. We don't feel our arenas are any less competitive. We can compete with anyone on actual costs. What we're dealing with is that nobody is really putting the rental price where it should be. It's a matter of for council to decide how much you're going to subsidize arenas. That's the end of the day. That's what's required. Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, I did have a good chance to look at the report. I thought it was great, but I also noticed that there are a lot of other communities that are putting the life cycle budget in there, and they're also extensively cheaper than our ice rates as well, though.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor, actually part of my questions were regarding the life cycle, which I will say I think we're being fiscally responsible by adding that in, even though I don't like the fact that our ice rates are higher. But my second question was that if we are collecting monies from, say, minor hockey or our hockey teams, and the ice does get rented back out when they've already paid for the ice, do they get reimbursed that money? Or, because to me that's like we're talking about trying to find extra money, but when, like, say, minor hockey comes in, they pay for a full season, so they're already paying for the ice that they sometimes, depending on playoffs, don't utilize.
Yes.
So are we really, like, is that going back to them, or do we need to be looking at how we are charging them come playoff season?
Through Mayor Caniff, right now the way the policy works is once they book the ice, they can't return it if they're not using it. They can ask the municipality to try to resell it. If we're able to resell it, they recoup that money.
But then that again gets to where there's really no incentive for us to sell it for them because we've already been paid for it. But that makes it more difficult for our associations.
But we would never deny that, and we would try to sell it.
Yeah.
And,
I'm just thinking, like, if we're looking at ways of booking it and doing it, then we need to be working with our associations to somehow with their fees and how we're collecting from them, and still encouraged to try and rent the ice for other areas for people to utilize that ice when it's not in use.
Thank you.
Just a comment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So overall, can I summarize the discussion that Mr. Kelly and group will be completely reviewing over the entire purview of arenas and coming back with a report to look at better ways that we can utilize the arena to ensure that we're maximizing revenue and maximizing usage of the facilities. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct.
Mr. Oche, can I get a motion to accept? Councilor Latimer.
Through the mayor, just wonder when the business plan was, when you plan on bringing it back to us. He's busy.
Mr. Kelly and Jeff, I'm not sure if you heard Councillor Latimer's question. When are the business plans due back to us?
Through Mayor Caniff, I would say it would be towards the end of the year. It's a big undertaking, and we have to get finance to cooperate. Right, Gord?
Sorry, just to clarify, the end of calendar year or the end of the season starting for 2019-20 season?
We're going to try to have it in place for the next season.
So effectively, so when there's booking ice for September 2019 on, we'll have had a review performed.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Oche, can we have a motion to accept?
Yes, you can.
And a seconder, Councillor Scotchy, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Thompson, 10A3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is going to budget, so I'll leave the funding questions to sit at budget, but I did want to briefly discuss the importance here. And this goes through to staff. I don't know who would be answering the question. It's a good report. It's very in-depth. I was really happy to read it. Just to summarize a little bit for maybe the people streaming this at home, what has the trend been for a person trying to find a doctor over the last few years? Has it gotten easier or harder?
Through you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Thompson, I think that was not part of the report in terms of what we put in there. So certainly anecdotally, we have heard, at least I have heard, that while individuals can connect with Healthcare Connect to put their name on the list to try and obtain a primary care practitioner, it is quite often not in the community of their choice. And so they then have to sit and either accept a physician that's not in their community or stay off the list and not have a primary care practitioner. Now, can I back that with lots and lots of data today, right now? No. But we can certainly look into that and get some more information for you.
If it's at all possible. I mean, reading through the lines, I think that was pretty evident. And to be honest, I will be dealing anecdotally here with a few of my questions. I have heard from a few people close to the healthcare sector that there are few, if any, doctors currently accepting patients. Could you comment on that?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff. There is one family health team that is currently taking doctors, one physician at the Tilbury Family Health Team. That being said, those clients are going on a wait list while the physician transitions into the organization.
Okay, so that was good. I like that since I know what we're talking about. But I think for people that don't, basically you're saying, there's practically one doctor currently accepting patients in Chatham-Kent, and that's an issue. I've also heard that a lack of doctors has had a direct and negative impact on landing economic development files. Could somebody comment on that? I heard anecdotally. Here we go. Sorry, Stuart.
It's okay. Cards in the mail.
I saw him in the corner.
Mr. McFadden to the rescue. Okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff, I can tell you that we have had discussions with one local investor who was trying to court someone in from out of town, and our lack of physicians inside of Chatham-Kent, the availability of physicians really turned that investment group off. So what I can tell you is what that person has told me, that it was a deciding factor for them in their decision on where to invest.
Okay, I'm sorry the walk was longer than the answer, but thank you very much. Beyond that, I don't really have too much more to ask. I can tell you that within the report, 42% of primary care physicians are over 55 years of age, so this isn't a problem that isn't going away. We talked about trends in the last in the last presentation from Mr. Bray, this is a trend that is getting worse as well. I look forward to having this discussion in the budget as to where we're going to fund it, because I think it's very important that we do so.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mayor Cleniff. Just quickly, I'd like to declare a conflict on this report. I didn't realize it was going to be pulled out, and it's connected very much to LIN funding, and I had mentioned before that my role at Transform is funded by the LIN, in part. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. First of all, Teresa, a good report. A lot of information there, and I really appreciate it. And my comment is that, in my opinion, this funding that's coming up to the budget is very important. I've been very active in recruitment in the Dresden area, and we've built a new $1.5 million facility, and we are definitely having difficulties filling it. And because of that, it's put a financial strain on our community, trying to juggle the funding and of course also the service that doctors provide for our community. So I'm encouraging everyone when it comes to budget that we support that recruitment funding. So thank you.
Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm just wondering, Teresa, like I read here, the Chatham-Kent Family Health Team has currently recruited. They've put a director of medical recruitment, right? They're looking for the Chatham, Wellsburg, Blenheim, Dresden, Ridgetown, and they could add 10 to 12 more physicians. So I think what Councillor Foss was talking about, is there any consideration for partnership with this particular medical recruitment director? Has that been investigated at all?
Through you, Mayor Caniff, there is potential partnership, and certainly with the physician talent attraction with our CALS group. Yes, we have not certainly had that conversation.
I'm just wondering whether or not that would definitely impact the budget in dollars.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I may just comment on that. The recruitment person for the Chatham-Kent Family Health Team is relatively new in that position. I'm sure that the group would probably be open to partnerships in that. As the report indicates, it's the Chatham-Kent Family Health Team. That's the only one presently that's short of doctors type thing, you know. So I think emphasis should be put on that, and that represents every community in Chatham-Kent, the Family Health Team does. So I think at budget time, I'm hoping that we can put our focus in on the Family Health Team for this year, and then maybe down the road as need requires, we can look at the other family health teams who currently have enough doctors, but because of aging doctor population, the need might be there down the road as well. So,
Councillor Thompson, can I get a motion to accept 10A3?
I'd be happy to make that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Foss. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Harrigan, 10A4.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a couple of questions for the recreational staff around this report. Thank you very much. It was really informative. The first question I have is to clarify what the play pods that you referenced would be like for end users, and if parent supervision is required for those who participate in those play pods.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So to answer your question, the play pods are an extension of our Play Rangers program. And the Play Rangers actually is a mobile recreation program that travels from community to community, and it provides barrier-free access, so free. And our proposed framework, where we're still working on, is in 2019 would be to focus on evenings and weekends, which would maximize family usage. And then, of course, we would look to our community partners to leverage opportunities as they exist.
Perfect, thank you. And through you, Mayor Caniff, could you provide an outline of what you think the budget or staffing requirements would be to offer the barrier-free service on the play pods?
Great. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So actually, at this point in time, there would be no base budget impact. We received funding from Public Health at the end of 2018, which allowed us to purchase the pods and also the equipment that goes within that. And then our proposal would be for the staffing costs for part-time and students would be to use the proceeds of the Mayor's Golf Tournament.
Okay, wonderful. And then just my final question, because this report does relate to a motion that I put forward a little bit earlier in the year. Can you identify if there are any risks to hosting a new summer camp? So for example, you start one up in Tilbury and there would be low demand, so you have a week that doesn't run. Are there financial risks, or because the camp's not running, the staff aren't working, therefore it's really no impact to budget?
Right, so the impact upfront cost of that would be training costs for the staff, approximately about $1,900 training and some upfront equipment costs. And then the only other impact would be, of course, the students not working for that week.
Right, okay. But in terms of the organizational budget, it would turn the $6,500 into a $2,000 budget item. Right. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Your report was really informative.
Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan, can I get a motion to accept?
Absolutely.
Seconded by Councillor Oche. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor C. McGregor. Let's start with number 5.
Perfect. Thank you, and through the mayor. First, I'd like to thank Bruce for the report that came out. I know it's a direction we definitely need to go in, and I fully agree with separating the two reports, the comprehensive plan and the 5-year official plan, to be able to look at different things. Now, in the comprehensive official plan, I was reading in the areas of what's included usually in the comprehensive plan, and in the one area it does say is integrated with planning for infrastructure and public service facilities and considers financial viability over the life cycle of these assets, which may be demonstrated through asset managed planning. And I do know through conversation with Bruce that this probably needs to be a part of the infrastructure area under Mr. Thomas, to be able to look at some of our facilities and public services that we have in a more comprehensive manner. So I guess what I'm asking is, and I can do this at the next meeting, do I need to be making a motion to ask if this happens, or is this something that will just naturally happen with the onset of this comprehensive official plan review?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor McGregor. So, yeah, not to confuse the terms, but a comprehensive review is the fancy planning term that they use in the provincial policy to really have a critical look at our land needs going into the future, whether it's for residential purposes, our own community services, our own employment, industrial, commercial purposes. So that's the nature of this part of the exercise. As part of that, the first key step, as I've noted there, is we need to update our population projections, our growth forecasts, to understand what our actual needs are going forward. Because the reality is, if we expand outward and expand our boundaries, we're going into prime agricultural farmland. That's just the nature of Chatham-Kent. So we need to really understand what is needed. Usually you plan over a 20-year horizon. So what do we need over the next 20 years so we have land secured, we're ready, it aligns with our infrastructure needs, or if it doesn't, what's needed in the future for spending. So that's it in a nutshell. And community facilities are part of that. Mm-hmm.
So I guess from this review, then we might get this review first, and then into a more in-depth once we know or have our projections for the next 20 years from this comprehensive plan. Then we would then maybe move into look at some of our other infrastructure and assets and how we're utilizing them to better match where we project we're going for the future.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think one of the things we need to understand is, from our own community facility standpoint, do we need new facilities? Do we retract? Is there better uses of those facilities? So those are all things we have to look at to be able to justify additional lands. So it's kind of a redevelopment opportunity potentially if we don't need those facilities for other purposes. And I'd also suggest, the last time we went through this, I worked on this from the outside. I would suggest we're in a lot better position now and have a lot better understanding of our infrastructure than we did it 5-6 years ago. There's been a lot of work in Thomas's group on asset management. There's been a lot of analysis on infrastructure in general, so it'll make this task a little easier this time going forward.
So now I'm just slightly confused. So do we need to give further direction, or will this just happen within this process?
It will happen in this process. We need to look at all aspects of what's required from a land basis and facility basis.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor C. McGregor, can I get a motion to accept? Seconded by Councillor Latimer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And Councillor C. McGregor, last but not least, placement of gravel.
And sorry, having been the largest complainer of gravel on council for the last 4 years, I couldn't help but pull this report out, and I would like to thank Mr. Corso and Public Works for bringing this out into our attention. I am a little disappointed that's not in our request for budget recommendations this term, but I also understand why it's not there and how this came about. But just an FYI and a heading going up in through to our budget, I do plan, and on the first night or first opportunity, to bring a motion that this be put into the budget, because I think it is very necessary. We have a lot of issues with gravel across all of Chatham-Kent, not only just in the areas I've complained about. So I think that in order to for safety and for keeping our roads built up and keeping them to a point that we can utilize, we need to obviously help provide more funds in the area of gravel to be able to maintain these roads to a probably a standard that we used to keep them to. I think at one point we were funded at gravel at every 2 years, and it was decided to cut back and fund to 3 years. But it is taking its toll, and it's showing in the complaints that we're getting at this point with our gravel roads. So, so just an FYI and a heads up. And I'll move that motion.
Right.
If
Seconder, Councillor Latimer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Judy, was that a record for a consent agenda? Number 11, notice of motion. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 12.
Item 12, well, thank you, Your Worship. Item 12A, appointments to Integris Inc. Board. We have Mr. Jim Hogan, the CEO, joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Don. So when I was here in December, we talked about a vacancy at our Integris Inc. board. And so tonight, looking for an appointment from council to fill that position.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Lindsay Boyd be appointed as the citizen appointment to the Integris board.
Councillor Crew.
I'll second that motion.
Questions? Seeing none, can we have a vote?
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Thank you very much. And I have one small slide, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and if it pops up. And what I wanted to do here is, when I was here in December, at the same time that we were looking for some of the appointments from the municipality of Chatham-Kent, the city of St. Thomas was also doing their appointments. So I just wanted to let council here know all of the board members that are part of the Integris Inc. board. There's 6 appointments from the municipality of Chatham-Kent. They're in your report tonight, and we have Lindsay Boyd there now as well. So Mayor Caniff, Councillor Solomon, Max Fantus, Helen Plattis, Pat McMahon, and Lindsay Boyd are the Chatham-Kent appointees for our board, for our board. And then for the city of St. Thomas, they've appointed Councillor Gary Clark and Joe Brophy. And then Corex, our third shareholder, they have Ken Morrison. So I just wanted to inform council as to who all the board members are on Integris Inc. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Number 13.
Number 13A, update on the adapting of the future storm and ice regime in Lake Erie in Chatham-Kent Lake Erie shoreline. Your Worship, we have a short presentation for council. Mr. Peter Thomas, you're going to do the introduction with Peter. Thank you.
Members of council and also members of the public, I'd like to introduce Mr. Peter Zuzak of Zuzak Incorporated. Mr. Zuzak is a professional geoscientist with over 25 years of experience with specialized expertise in coastal erosion and flooding. Mr. Zuzak was the successful applicant of the National Resource Canada Call for Climate Change Adaptation Program. Chatham-Kent, with support from other levels of government, will contribute funding to this project. Chatham-Kent's share was $100,000. The study will address the needs to advance adaptation and increase resilience to climate change. We have chosen to focus on Lake Erie. Both the Infrastructure Engineering Services Group and Community Development are actively engaged in this project. Lake Erie erosion and flooding has had significant impact on our residential homes, businesses, and infrastructure. We've spoken quite at length around this table here about the impact on Clearville Park, Rose Beach Line, Erie Shore Drive, and also the bluffs along Talbot Trail. It's one of our highest concerns, and I want to note, unfortunately, that our mitigation plans and our funding are not for this project and for future plans are not included in the asset management plan. So it's a real concern. It's a very important study for CK. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Zuzak.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Good evening, everyone, your mayor, council, and public. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'd like to walk you through the presentation to give you an overview of this important study on the Chatham-Kent shoreline. So firstly, a brief overview of what we'll talk about tonight. We'd like to highlight the study partners and the funding arrangements to make this happen. We will review the Chatham-Kent shoreline from space to provide you with some context for the dynamics. We'd like to provide some background on the climate change study and the impacts on the Lake Erie shoreline specifically. We'll also talk to you about some of the hazards that are being felt here in this community and some of the background work that we've already completed. And then finally, and most importantly, we'll speak to you tonight about the schedule for the community engagement to co-develop the solutions to the coastal hazards in this community. So first of all, it's important to recognize the role of Natural Resources Canada. This work is being produced through their climate change adaptation platform, and they were a significant funder to this overall study. But also equally important to highlight the role of Chatham-Kent in moving forward with this study and providing financial resources. The Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority is also providing significant in-kind support to make this study happen, as well as the province of Ontario, the federal government, and the International Joint Commission. So the next slide up on the screen here is a satellite image of Lake Erie from the spring of 2018. You can see the municipality highlighted in green there. We felt it was important here to start at the scale of the entire lake to highlight the dynamic processes that influence this lake and govern the shoreline. The scale of many of the things that are happening on this lake are much larger than the municipality boundaries. And as we move forward in this scientific investigation, we need to keep in mind that the scale, again, is happening at very large size and dimensions of this lake. And if you look, for example, at the Rondeau Peninsula, the swirling motions of the currents, and you can see the different colors of the sediments. Same with the Long Point Peninsula. So a very big lake, a very dynamic lake, and as we move forward with this scientific investigation, we need to have a solid understanding of those physical processes so that we can plan accordingly. So zooming in, next slide is the municipality shoreline along Lake Erie, roughly 90 kilometers of shoreline. In the center, we have the Rondo Peninsula, Rondo Bay, the provincial park, and the community of Erio. I think we're all quite aware that these are low-lying lands that are heavily flood-prone and are experiencing frequent flood events in the last couple of years as Lake Erie has moved to higher levels. As we move to the northeast and the southwest, we have the high bluff zone where the erosion of these bluffs is happening at a very fast pace and creating hazards for the road infrastructure and the homes that are located in close proximity to the shoreline. The other key aspect on this slide that we wanted to highlight are the arrows there that are denoting the direction in which the sand is moving. And as we move through this study and through the many meetings that will follow, we'll talk a lot more about why that's important. But as we go through the summary here today, important to understand that the sediment that erodes from these high bluff environments is pushed towards the center of the study area, towards the Rondo Peninsula, and accumulates in the middle of your municipality. There's also some sediment that moves to the southwest towards Point Pelee National Park. All right, and so a few words about climate change, really brief here, but just to highlight the context of this work and what's important for Chatham-Kent. And so first of all, I think we're all quite aware that greenhouse gases are accumulating in our atmosphere. This is trapping heat that would otherwise normally escape into space. And as a result, our global temperatures are increasing. We've seen roughly a 1 degree increase in the temperatures globally since the 1900s. And the graphic on the screen there, we see the orange trend upwards, and whoops, that's this guy here. Oh, okay. So, you wanna? Is there a laser? You're gonna go back. Okay. Oh, there's my laser. Okay, here we go. So right to here is our present condition. We've seen roughly this 1 degree of warming, and the key thing to bring forward here and to grasp is that we don't know where the future is going. And so this gray period moving forward, there's tremendous uncertainty as to how much warming will we experience and how will that affect other aspects of our climate that are important in Chatham-Kent, including things like ice cover on the lake and storm intensity. So we've had this period of warming. We have a future that's very uncertain, and our job as scientists and planners is to embrace that uncertainty and move forward with the planning. All right, and then a couple more quick pictures here on temperature. Again, to highlight this 1 degree increase globally is highlighted on the left-hand side. And down in Chatham-Kent, we have roughly 1 degree of warming, which you see here on the scale on the right-hand side. If we flip to the right-hand side of the image there, the winter increases, you see that there's a lot more warming happening in the winter. And what that translates to locally here for Chatham-Kent and your Lake Erie shoreline is a lot less ice. We'll talk about ice a little bit more in the next slide, but reduced ice cover on the lake due to the warming is a significant concern moving forward. So on to some of the things that we are studying, and again, this is just a quick overview of the ongoing technical work, and we'll certainly talk to the council and the community more about this in the coming meetings throughout 2019. But some of the things that we are studying and bringing forward with the scientific work is looking at the frequency of large coastal storms and the peak wind speeds and the fact that they may be increasing or changing in the future. We know already that our temperatures are warming, and this results in less winter ice cover. I think many in the room will be able to think back to the 70s and 80s when Lake Erie was covered from December to March, solid locked up in ice, and that's not the case anymore on a consistent basis. What that does is expose that shoreline now to storms in the wintertime when the lake would have been previously frozen over, which is increasing the amount of hazards that the community is facing. We're also seeing, and this has been documented as well, increased rainfall events happening in southern Ontario. We feel that this is potentially influencing the instability of the high bluff environment and the failures of those slopes in your high bluff environment. So again, another hazard that's changing. And finally, the increased storm intensity may result in more frequent and severe flooding along the Lake Erie shoreline. And I think that we can all agree that this is playing out on Erie Shore Drive already, we'll certainly talk more about that in the technical meetings. On to a couple maps here to highlight some of the technical work. And so we have a snapshot there, a map of the High Bluff environment to the southwest of the community of Erio. We've got Highway 3 or the Talbot Trail running along there. And what we're showing with those two colorful bands, the yellow is the estimate of where the shoreline will be in 50 years. The red is the estimate of where the shoreline will be in 100 years. And we can see just quickly in this example that this is putting tremendous stress on the road, even at 50 years, and there's also other development that is threatened by this ongoing erosion of this high bluff environment. It's also important to highlight that this is some work we've just done, has not factored in the impacts of climate change yet. So as we look to the future and estimate what will happen as we have a lake move towards a lake when there's no ice in the future, those lines are likely going to move further inland. And so this is something we're doing across the entire community to provide the necessary information to plan for these erosion hazards and come up with solutions. All right, so with flooding, a couple of snapshots there again from Erie Shore Drive. We are reviewing the historical flooding, but also looking to understand how climate change will change these threats and the kind of risks that will be faced along the low-lying flood-prone lands in the community. The next slide is the community of Erio in the southern tip of Rondo Provincial Park. And the map that I'll speak to here is the background of the map is a 1955 aerial. So that's not what Erio looks like today, as we know. This is from 1955. The background slide when you had the coal port operation in the current Marina Basin. And we're starting with 55 to highlight some of the significant changes that have happened over time. So if we're starting on the west in the community of Erio, the red line is where the shoreline was in 1955. There's been a continuous and steady increase in growth of the beach on the west side of the navigation channel. And for those that are down there on a regular basis, you know we have a very wide beach here. This is the sand that's accumulating in the center of your study area up against the federal navigation channel. So this long jetty here is trapping the sediment, and there's a growth of the beach here on the west side. That may be perceived as a positive thing if you enjoy the beach or you have a home in that location. But that sand that's being trapped on the west side is coming at the expense of the shoreline on the east side. So again, this is the Rondo Provincial Park. We have our navigation channel. Where we are today is this white outline in 2018. Where we were in 1868 is this dash line. All right? So we've lost over 600 meters of shoreline at the southern tip of the provincial park in 150 years. That's over 4 meters of erosion per year. And so this slide just quickly, hopefully, highlights the challenges we have with sediment and managing the sediment in this community. We have a lot on the one side of the jetty, and because of the sand accumulating in this region, we're eroding in this portion at over 4 meters per year. In addition to the loss of the wetlands and the habitat in the provincial park, the beach is no longer connected to the jetty. So at one time, the sand beach here was connected. Now there is complete exposure to the commercial fishing fleet from waves inside the fuel dock in the basin here. And this little thin strip, it's of course hard to tell with this map, is not much more than just a sand ridge that's very vulnerable to storm impacts. And so one of the things we're looking at, working closely with the Conservation Authority, is trying to understand the evolution of this, but there is a real threat that this is going to disappear. And now the entire bay is going to be exposed to the types of storms that you see on Lake Erie, which is a real concern for us moving forward. All right, so next we'd like to speak to you about the community engagement and the co-development of the solutions. And I think this is likely the most important slide in the deck. Without a doubt, this is one of the most important aspects of the entire study. So we are right in the middle of our technical work, and this technical work will carry on till December 2019. Later this winter into the spring, we will release a survey, an online survey for the community to document the existing challenges that those in the community are facing. We plan to do that online, but we'll certainly make sure that there's paper copies available for those that don't have access to, or don't feel comfortable using a computer. Moving on to the public meetings, later in March, we will have our first formal public meeting where we plan to engage with the community and provide an overview of the entire study. We will come back in June of this year to talk about the vulnerability assessment, what are the erosion and flooding hazards, some of the sand management issues that I highlighted at Erio, and what are some of the ecosystem challenges as well. We come back in September of 2019 to look for feedback on the management options. And so collectively together, we're going to co-develop the solutions to the community for the shoreline hazards. We will be looking for feedback from everyone in September on the management options we come up with. And then finally in December 2019 will be the study recommendations. And the final report is due in March 2020, hopefully a little bit sooner. So in summary, the Lake Erie shoreline erosion and flooding hazards will present significant challenges to existing Chatham-Kent infrastructure and abutting landowners in the future, and with a footnote that they are already providing severe challenges in some locations. The study is going to estimate climate change impacts on coastal storms, ice cover in the future, erosion and flooding rates. Climate change will make these hazards worse in the future. How much worse is under investigation. And most importantly, again, the community, all levels of government, including the federal government, the province, this municipality, the Conservation Authority, will be heavily engaged throughout this study, and we will co-develop the adaptation options together. And finally, the report will be due at the latest, March 2020. And with that, I would like to thank you for listening and be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the for this update. Your study is going to be right from Wheatley to Rondeau. Is that correct?
The entire shoreline of the municipality of Chatham, so it goes well beyond Rondeau as well.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because it seemed like you kind of zoned in on Aereo there with the sand and that. But
right. Yes. Good point. But the study does go all the way to Wheatley, and we're showing you the examples there at Erio to give you an example of some of the studies that are ongoing. But we'll certainly be looking at those issues at Wheatley as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for the report. Very succinct and very informative. Can I get a motion to accept report? Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Bondi. All in favor? Carried.
Item 13B, continuous improvement and red tape reduction project. Your Worship, we're blessed with another report from and presentation, Mr. Norton.
Good evening. This one. Good evening, Mayor and Council. You've heard already some very sobering and informative reports, and now, unfortunately, you have to listen to me. Let this become perhaps the halftime show in the middle of the council meeting. I will try to be brief, and certainly my topic is not nearly as important as things like our disappearing shoreline, which is just so important. But this project is important to our department and to the work we're trying to do to grow our economy. If you were able to read the Globe and Mail this week, you'd see there was an article in there talking about the province of British Columbia, which is actually being hailed currently by our neighbors to the south because of its success in cutting red tape. And so the province of British Columbia had a government come in several years ago now, and they made an interesting requirement of all bureaucratic staff. They said if you're going to propose a new regulatory requirement on businesses, you have to also come forward with 2 requirements that you're going to remove. So it was a 2-for-1er, and it's been very successful. They've actually, they say, reduced regulatory requirements on new businesses by 1/3 in the province of British Columbia over the past decade, and the province's economy is now humming, and they're saying they're being given credit for that reduction in some of their red tape. So we want to emulate that. We want to be a trendsetter. We want to reduce red tape, and what we are calling it is our continuous improvement project, right? So we've been focused on this since at least last summer, and just so you understand what we're focused on, development, when we talk about development, we're talking about all of the groups in our department, such as economic development, land use planning services, building development services, legal services, fire services. We also have a big component from my colleagues in engineering who are involved in traffic and storm. And then we have provincial requirements that we would love the province to reduce some of their requirements that we can't do anything about. So all of that affects those people who are coming forward and trying to do development. What are we talking about when we talk about development? What we're talking about is everything from the homeowner that wants to, say, build a garage or an addition onto their house, to someone who wants to renovate an existing building, like you can see the building in the middle that was converted from a cinema to a craft brewery, and it's very successful, to, on the right-hand side, someone who's building a whole subdivision or a large project. That's what we consider, that's what we're talking about, that's the scope of this project, is continuous improvement in the development process for businesses. So what has been done to date? So I just want to quickly tell you that we were focused on this last summer, already beginning to focus on this. My team has for several years been committed to, or for many years, been committed to continuous improvement. Staff on the front line make adjustments already to the processes and are already authorized to make things simpler where that's possible. Directors and managers are already on a regular basis making adjustments to the larger processes that they're involved in. And so we try to empower staff to do that. But more intentionally last summer, I began saying, let's make this a focus in the coming year. And then, very helpfully, I heard during the election period a lot of people bringing up the fact that they felt that we should focus on that as well. We heard a lot of talk about there needs to be more of an emphasis put on continuous improvement of our processes that help businesses grow and develop in our community. So while you were actually campaigning and making those comments during the election, we were doing our internal work already on our continuous improvement project, so that as soon as the mayor came into his office, one of the first meetings I had with him was to introduce him to this program and tell him, that great idea that you had, sir, we're already, we're on it, and we knew you were going to tell us to do that even before you got elected, so we were working on it. And so we've been hammering away at it, and he has been encouraging us and been a great help as well. He's brought all of his ideas to us. And so this is this synergy we've got going with what we're doing and what you're doing, what you've told us, what we heard from you during the election, and since you've been here in council. So we've been doing an internal review over the fall to really find out what do our staff think need to be changed. I've been asking staff directly, what can we change to make things easier for businesses? If there's a 5-page form that we currently require businesses to fill out, someone who needs a building permit, someone who's making a planning application, can we reduce that 5-page application to 1 page or 2 pages? Help me understand why we can't do that. Now what we're about to do is as we enter 2019, we're about to go out now and consult with the public, with the community, with our customers. So we're going to be engaging with property owners and their agents. We're going to be engaging with the constructions and trades. So we want to specifically go and speak with those who actually do buildings. And we want to engage with professional services. So we're doing several things. We're going to hold some public meetings widely where we're just going to engage and ask people to come and give us input. But we're also reaching into our files and saying, who are our regular users? Maybe who are some irregular users who've had experiences with us? Let's go interview those people. And we're going to do that. Here's the timeline. I'm not going to bore you with our process, but suffice to say, we're about to launch and are launching actually today this process. So we have a website that's been launched where we're going to ask the public to go online and fill out a survey. And we all see this funneling through to analysis happening in the spring, and then we're going to be coming back to you as a council with some recommendations. Now, some of those recommendations may require more resources from you. I don't know yet. I don't want to prejudge what we're going to obviously conclude, but we are focused on this project in its current scope, ending sometime at the end of spring or early summer, with some recommendations back to you as a council. We'll report to you. I also want to say we're working closely and have already reported to our Community Development Advisory Committee. We have our chair and Councillor Hall who's going to lead us forward, and we're going to be consulting with them regularly as well. So that's the project. There's the website. The survey is online, and that's the end of the halftime show commercial. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Latimer.
Through the mayor, Mr. Norton, on your analysis panel, do you plan on including individuals who are outside of the current community development department?
Yes. So,
and who
do you mean outside into other departments?
Yes,
inside
someone who's not in your department, because I think if your own department analyzes their own department, there's a chance that they may miss something.
It's a great point. So we have absolutely engaged. We've made this same presentation to the executive management team, have the endorsement of the CAO, have engaged my colleagues around me, and would like their assistance as well. Certainly asking for them to give us input, would want to receive their input on our department. But let me say that development isn't just exclusively the purview as well of the department. It does involve, if I go back to this slide, it does involve other departments, yes, specifically engineering. Another area that I didn't even list up there is the Public Utilities Commission. So pipes in the ground, roads, traffic studies, storm management, all of that is work that's done outside of community development and does have a great impact on what our customers have to go deal with when developing the community. So we want that to be part of the process as well. And as for your specifically your comment about who's going to be sort of adjudicating this, was that kind of your question?
Not so much adjudicating as much as analyzing. And would we get a chance to see the actual report and analysis?
Yes, absolutely. So probably we haven't kind of finalized this yet, but certainly the survey results, we will bring that data back to you, absolutely. We will also take all of the feedback we receive and be very transparent about it with you and with the whole community. So there's no intention here to hide anything. It's it's the good, bad, the ugly, all of that. What needs to come back, we need to hear it all.
It's not so much to hide it as much as the bias, the inherent bias that you would have in. Sometimes when you're so much a part of a process, you can't see outside of it yourself. So it's just nice. I think it's important that you have outside people who are not involved. And that would include that circle. So people who are outside of that circle who can analyze the data that you have and give you an unbiased opinion as to what they think the part of the improvement process should include.
So I would say that, again, our Community Development Advisory Committee, which consists of 3 members of council, and then we have 4 or 5 members of the public, that group is going to be giving feedback to us specifically on a more regular basis. I think those are some independent community members that we're accountable to as a department. The other comment I would make is that usually our customers, who are people taking out building permits, planning applications, they're not shy about giving us feedback. They're very, very clear to us when they're happy with us and very clear with us when they're unhappy with us. I can tell you that just by example, the building department, we hold a barbecue every year for all of our customers. During that barbecue, I go around and talk to the different ones. And again, they're very clear. I'll get 5 that just think the team is the best team they've ever been, and it's so much better than it was 10 years ago. And then I'll get another 5 that think we're doing a terrible job. So I don't have any concerns actually about receiving only sort of biased comments. I think we're going to get pretty honest feedback. We get that regularly. Thank you for those comments.
Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question and clarification. In your paperwork here, it says you're going to send out the online survey to people that have used the service within the last 2 years. Would that be available to anybody online?
Yes. You're welcome to give us input, and we'd like to hear input from those people who are at home watching on TV. We want input from everyone.
Sorry, those sitting around the horseshoe cannot do the survey right now. Any other questions? Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick comment. Like John mentioned, our new Community Development Advisory Committee had the chance to hear about this initiative earlier this month at our first meeting, and as a committee, we provided endorsement to this project. I think we believe, and I believe it's an excellent project for the department to take on. It really takes, taking a look in the mirror in terms of some of the processes and procedures. I love the public engagement aspect, and you can see the Let's Talk Chatham-Kent.ca is a great tool to use. So I think it's a healthy and positive exercise to go through. So kudos to you guys for taking this on. I think our whole committee is looking forward to hearing back, and I hope Council provides the endorsement tonight as well. So thank you.
Councillor Scotchy.
Mine's really short now because of Councillor Hall there, but I just wanted to say on behalf of Council, we do appreciate the fact that we did hear that a lot on the campaign trail in regards to red tape. So I really like to thank yourself, Mayor Caniff, and as well as yourself, Mr. Norton, in regards to doing that, because I think cutting red tape is very, very important in our municipality, and I really appreciate the initiative. So thank you.
Okay, motion. Councillor Latimer. Oh. Yes, sorry, there is a recommendation.
I move
yes.
the report.
Sorry, it's a recommendation.
Recommendation, sir.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Kirkwood-White. Any other questions? Let's put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
14A.
Item 14A, 2019 capital budget. We have a presentation with Tim Dick, Director of Drainage Asset and Waste Management.
Kevin Rankin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to introduce Kevin Rankin in a minute, but I just thought I'd do a bit of an introduction. This report is actually included as part of the capital budget tonight, which you're seeing for the first time. We wanted to do an individual report so you got a little bit more detail on it and got to see up close what it was about. I also wanted to recognize several members of the fleet staff are here. Also in the crowd tonight. So with that, Kevin is our manager of fleet services. He's going to go through a short presentation on some of our current challenges with the fleet operation.
I was about to say thank you, Mayor Caniff, but thank you, Councilor McGregor. Okay, so thank you for your time tonight, Council. I'd like to do a quick PowerPoint presentation just to add or supplement the report that was brought before you. What you see there is the existing PABC fleet garage, approximately 8,900 square feet, that houses 5 technicians. As you're aware in the report, last April, Fleet Services brought on the in-house work of the fire services. We were no longer able to outsource the work. We had to bring it in-house. So as you notice there on that slide, there's insufficient size in our current buildings at PABC and Wallaceburg to bring in the large aerial equipment for that device you can see there. We have limited space and height. You'll see that in the center of that slide. That's an aerial device. It has to be lifted up. You'll see the ladder portion has to be put up in the air to do maintenance on it. Because of the low ceilings in the existing building, we can't get that up high enough because of duct work and cross support members to actually work on it. So we have to do some work inside, then take it outside. Are you going to do it? Okay. The next slide, you'll see that we have a Vactor unit with the red circle there. You notice it's leaning to the right due to uneven floor grade because of settlement. There's no room to maneuver. You can see how tight the surroundings are in there. And literally the mechanics have to shuffle equipment around just to get their toolboxes and stuff to all the different types of equipment in there. The recirculation intake of exhaust happens. Once again, you'll see the intake to the right. The ventilation system takes it out and then brings it back around and literally comes right back in through the south end of the building. There is units upstairs that house many different training rooms, etc., and often we have to evacuate them just because even with a state-of-the-art evac system we got to evacuate the diesel fumes, it still gets back into the building. You'll see there, for those of you who are familiar with taking wheels off a truck to inspect brakes during annual inspection, there's insufficient room to maneuver around in there for the technician to pull those wheels out. Insufficient height, that apparatus in there is a fire apparatus. In order to do maintenance work on the engine on that, the cab has to be tilted up in the air, and we have to get it pertinent up touching the roof just to get the safety on to keep so the technician can work in there safely on that engine. Once again, insufficient space. You'll see some grating in the floor. The mechanics' toolbox is there. They can't move their toolboxes through amongst all the equipment. Simply, there's not enough room. This picture was taken in early December, so if you can put this in perspective, the garage is usually so full that the technicians have to work outside in poor weather. Take, for instance, last Saturday and Sunday, put yourself in their shoes working on that type of equipment out in those weather conditions. We don't have adequate storage, so we have procured C-cast containers, C-cans, as they're noted. We can't put anything that freezes out in there, but we can store non-freezable items in the winter. Once again, we have lack of storage for fabrication. You'll see the hole in that wall goes out into another C-can because we simply had to cut a hole in the wall and put a C-can in there just to keep room for storage. It's 286-foot square limited locker and lunch space. For that little room there houses 5 technicians. They have their lunch in there, that's their office, and their lockers are in there for their clothing. This is once again at Park Ave Business Center. That truck is trying to get back in. We have to use the Public Works wash bay. That truck there, you notice it's hard to get it in there because of the dimensions of it, but it's also waiting for 2 trucks in there that are already being washed. So we have to have a spotter help that guy back in as well. We're losing valuable time of technicians because they're waiting to get into that building. Gillard shortcomings, that's our facility in Wallaceburg. On the left, you'll see an aerial device sticking out the back of the door. That's a 1996 aerial device that's going to soon be replaced in about 3 weeks with a new one. It's even bigger yet. It would stick out the door farther. To the right, you see a single axle plow truck that the technicians can get the door down on, but they can't get around it properly to work on it. And if that was a tandem truck, they can't put the door down. The new proposed facility at Siemens Drive, you'll see the circular area to your right. That's where we're proposing putting in the facility on land already owned as part of the Park Ave Business Center. The new facility would be 15,400 square feet, which is about 18% larger than the Wallaceburg and PABC facilities now combined. So in conclusion, we're asking for funding over 2 years, 2019 and 20, 1.2 million year 1 and 2.5 million year 2. This would also eliminate the need for a $1.5 million public work water crew investment because they could use the Park Ave Business Center that we're currently housed in. There's logistical, health and safety, and economies of scale. If we merge the two together, we can optimize administration. A wash bay, which you would have seen in that previous slide, will also extend life cycle of vehicles because we can literally wash them down properly. And one of the other things in the report, you'll note we have to do AVL installs and grader repairs. We have to borrow other facilities from other departments simply because once we brought fire in-house, we have no place to do those installs and repairs. Also, improved part storage would lessen the downtime of equipment. Thank you.
Can I get a motion? Councillor Bondi, seconded by Councillor Foss. Questions? Councillor Solomon, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out, that building has been in use, the Park Avenue Business Center, for instance, and the other buildings have been in use for since 1998, somewhere around there, 2000, 1998. So what's the triggering event that requires that they be done now? Is it the bringing in-house of the fire equipment? Or, because I mean, if there were problems that have been described today, they didn't happen between 2017 and now unless there's a triggering event of some kind.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So it's a culmination of things. Certainly the addition of additional facility or repair units to be repaired, types of repairs to be done, but as well, it's an ongoing challenge of trying to manage two sites with one management group, and the really inefficiency of the current facility we've got. As we said in the report, the facility was constructed, the PABC facility was constructed to build automotive parts, not be a fleet or public works garage. So we've made the best of it as much as we could. But we feel in order to move forward with a proper fleet operation, improving all of the various components that we can and addressing health and safety and other concerns, we need to do that at this time. So I can't really point to one thing. Probably the biggest trigger, Councillor Solomon, would be the addition of fire vehicles, the installation of AVL in the vehicles, and the mere size of some of these units have grown. Even the tandem trucks over the past 20 years have gotten larger and longer and wider.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, while you're up there, Mr. Dick, you talked about efficiencies created by doing this. Are there any, this is the capital item that we're dealing with right now.
Right.
And if we spend capital money to do this, what efficiencies and are there cost reductions as a result of that you're going to tell us about?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So one of the things that we mentioned, or Kevin touched on briefly, was the opportunity to address issues with the water crew, the Public Works water crew. We have not quantified that number. In addition, we also have the possibility of creating additional space which may be able to be utilized for other things, whether it is rented out or possibly used for other facilities such as the Wallaceburg facility.
Okay. Any staff reductions, costs in that area?
No, but I would suggest that there will be, that it's a cost avoidance for not needing to hire additional staff because of supervisory challenges.
Okay, thank you.
Since we are running two operations.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. It wasn't really something I wanted to discuss, though, but in the whole 2019 capital budget, I would like to make an amendment that on line item 59, we strike the verbiage recommend to remove to roads upgrade policy. Yeah, it's in the capital budget, line item 59. It's in the deferred funding. I'm not really going to get into, no, it's line item 59, IES, Shrewsbury Brock Street Road reconstruction. The line is, the only thing I want removed is recommend to move to road upgrade policy.
So just to clarify, under explanation, so you're asking to change to what?
It just sits in the capital then at that point. That's how I understand it. Right, I don't want it. We're getting. I need a seconder anyway here, guys.
Councillor Latimer, seconder.
Thanks. So there we go. Yeah, in a nutshell, I don't want to move it up off the deferred. I don't want to move it around. I just, so maybe I should start with, could somebody explain exactly what the road upgrade policy is? Maybe we should start at the beginning here. There seem to be some confused faces, so.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
So the road upgrade policy was a policy that was approved through council not too long ago that basically follows the local improvement process for residents that wish to upgrade the road either from a gravel road to a tar and chip surface or from a gravel road to an asphalt surface or make any additional improvements and upgrades, i.e. curb and gutter, widen road cross sections, any additional improvements of that nature that currently aren't present on the road. So it's a policy that provides a step-by-step guideline for the residents to proceed as a local improvement through a petition process, which explains the cost component will be 100% upfront to the residents and landowners abutting the road upgrade with the ongoing maintenance to be the responsibility of the municipality.
And when was that passed?
I cannot recall when that was passed. Was it October? Approximately October of last year.
Okay. So I understand the rationale behind it. I really do. I guess my concern is, well, first off, they never applied or brought forward a petition, so this decision is kind of coming unilaterally without the residents' knowledge, right?
No petition was received for the Shrewsbury Brock Street road upgrade, no.
Okay. I guess my other concern is that if you don't know the area, thousands of cars use this tiny little stretch of road, and these aren't residents that use this road primarily in the summer months. They are tourists, and they are people that take part in the fishing, and they're accessing the only quasi-public boat launch on Rondo Bay. So the residents there weren't so much concerned for their own well-being. They'd be very happy if everybody forgot the boat launch existed and just went back to having a nice, quiet road. But that's not the case. So my concern is that if we do something like this, then suddenly, respectfully, everything could be moved to this road upgrade policy. If we expanded the Park Ave, Queen Streets to include a turning lane, that could be pushed to that policy because that's what people want in that area. So I don't want to get into the whole, I think this should be in the budget. I just want to remove that line because back in July of 2016, former Councillor Herman brought this whole thing forward. This has been going on for 3 years already. She asked for a report back to council with recommendations of launch capital improvements and the budget required. Now, it came to a little bit of history, came to realize that we don't own the actual boat launch 100%. It's a shared agreement, a historical agreement with the landowner there. We own about a third. So after 2 years, in June, a report came back saying Public Works, Operational, and Parks Life Cycle funds would be used to cover the Public Works tasks. Makes sense. The proposed Brock Street reconstruction project estimates $250 plus a little bit for contingency. And then staff will submit the Shrewsbury Boat Launch Brock Street reconstruction to the 2019 capital budget for consideration. And that's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking to move it up the list, down the list. I don't want to force anybody's plan down the list. I just don't think that it's the purview of the homeowners that live there to fix something that really needs to be fixed for other people's enjoyment and for their safety. So if there's any other questions, I'd love to hear them, but that's the only change I'd like to make.
Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I need clarification as to where you're moving it from.
I'm not moving it at all.
You're just taking it out?
No, I'm just removing the recommendation to move it to the road upgrade policy and leave it in capital, which was the original intent of the motion and the recommendation that staff gave.
Okay, so it's not scheduled immediately for capital, and when it comes up again, we'll have another chance at discussing that?
I'd imagine in 2020, okay. Potentially.
All right, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Latimer, followed by Councillor Bondi. Oh, you're good. Councillor Bondi? I wanted to clarify one thing, that the motion on is for 14A is recommended that 2019 capital projects outlined in Appendix A be approved. So you may have been confused on accepting a portion of this because what we talked about was a piece of that motion. It was just for information. So I want, if you're okay with continuing with the motion to accept 14A, because that's what I was asking for.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Canf. Yeah, maybe we should clarify. If we remove, recommend to move.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify first before.
Well, I'm not clear. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no. But the motion I asked for was the complete 14A, which is number 1 and 2, not just for the fleet building.
Yes, I was clear on that.
Okay, perfect. And Councillor Foss, you're clear on that as well? Okay. Perfect. Yes. Any other questions?
Can I still just ask a quick question?
Certainly.
Thank you. So if we do this, I think I get it, but just to be sure, if we recommend to move to road upgrade policy, that would leave it at reconstruction of Brock Street, and that doesn't mean that we're going to do this immediately. It just takes that recommendation out, still stays exactly where it was previously, but the residents won't be asked to pay for anything, correct?
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Just this piece right here we're going to vote on right now. Okay, we'll put it to vote.
So with regards to the amendment, the motion passes 16-0.
Okay, any other questions related to 14A? Councillor Harrigan.
Sorry, through you, I did have a question. In Appendix A, in the capital projects listed for funding in 2019, the one comment, rank number 12, notes that it's contingent on receiving disaster mitigation funding in its revenues. How confident are we that we will receive that funding? And if we do not receive that funding, will those funds just be allocated to chip away at Appendix C in the ranked order, or what's the process there?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So if you look at it, the application of the funding applies to actually 12 and 13. And if you look at the column which talks about revenue, those are the assumptions that we feel that we could get from that funding source. If we do not get that amount of money, we will defer the project. It'll essentially become like a B item where it's partially funded, and it'll go into the queue again next year. And if we have funding, we'll apply it to those two items.
Okay. And so that would, though, or could impact our total capital budget for this year. If we don't spend those dollars, will we reallocate? Like, we'll bump those items into B and choose other items with those capital funds? Like, we're still going to work with the same buckets?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Essentially, we're still applying the same funds from CK, but we will have to make up now the revenue from the external funding.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Hall.
Just concerning the presentation about the fleet, the potential new build, what happens with the site in Wallaceburg and the Park Ave site, or what's the plan for those two buildings if this new build happens?
So thank you, Mayor Caniff. Sorry if I wasn't clear enough. So the initial plans for the Park Avenue Business Center site would be to address inadequacies with respect to some of the public works divisions, specifically the water crew. With respect to the Wallaceburg building, there are opportunities there possibly for additional public works usage or even outsourcing or renting of space there going forward to potentially other areas, either internal or external.
Okay, have you been working with economic development at all with any opportunities there in that regard?
Not yet.
Okay, and not about the presentation, but another question. I was wondering if staff could describe in detail the pilot project for pedestrian crossings that is in the report for various downtown centers.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Caniff. So the request came through from various BIAs, downtown BIAs, really to investigate a safer downtown crossing opportunity for pedestrians. This is a capital project that will look at these opportunities in consultation with the BIAs, which may include some signage, concrete works, and line painting at specific site locations. So ultimately, it's very similar to a project that was initiated out in some counties, out in the county of Essex. Some various municipalities have these crossings in place where it's line painting with signage actually in the center of the road. And what this sign is, it's on a flexible base that's subject to, of course, getting hit by traffic. But the whole purpose of it is to allow for a traffic calming kind of measure and to really highlight that that is a crossing location. These have to be obviously placed in very strategic locations where you have a strong downtown kind of buildup and presence that all the vehicles are already driving slow enough, and because higher speeds and higher volumes of traffic do require that next level of signage, which are called those pedestrian crossing infrastructures with the lights and the additional signage requirements. So, but when you're in a downtown setting and there's already the on-street parking and there's already the pedestrian mobility happening already, these types of crossings are actually performing very well in other communities. So something that we'd like to investigate and something that the BIAs are pushing for us to investigate as part of this project.
Okay, so you have had consultation with BIAs already, or are you going to?
We've had consultation with BIAs that they see this as something that they are very interested in and would like some more information on for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, so we can put it to vote. Oh, Councillor Solomon.
I have a more I asked about the building before, but on more general on the questions on the capital budget. So if I mean, you could take hours going through this if you did them line by line, but if I were to disagree with the way you've ranked priorities, my option, I guess, is to vote against the capital budget. Either that or we'd start pulling line after line out, and we'd all be doing this until the cows come home sometime in, maybe the crows go home sometime in March. So I'm just looking at these, and some of these things, for instance, the Rose Beach line stabilization, line 33, unless I'm mistaken here, the whole project, the way it's set up, you're not getting anything this year, or am I wrong on that?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. No, you are correct. That is currently on the deferred list. The reason why Rose Beach line was identified on the deferred list is in turn with the decision that was recently made to put a hold on that project pending the outcome of actually the presentation that you've seen earlier today.
And then I saw just below that the seawall at Chatham Legion Park that has been falling in for, I don't know, there's been a fence there for, I don't know, 5-6 years. And that is deferred, I don't know to when. It looks like 2020 to 2027. Except I don't understand that one either. But I do see that we're putting $600,000 into Round the River Phase 2. Got that right? Yep, right there. I'm sorry, I just magically made this bigger. That's number 18.
Correct. That's correct, yep.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to go through line by line, but I guess the option is that if we don't like the priorities that have been set, then we either vote against it, or if we accept them, we vote for it. Otherwise, it's line by line. Okay, I understand.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor C. McGregor? Okay, sorry. All votes are in. Motion passes 14-2.
14B.
14B, committee recommendations, bridges and culverts.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Thank you. I'll move the recommendations from this committee.
Need a seconder? Councillor Crew, questions? Sorry, Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Having chaired this, it was brought to me to kind of bring this report. I'm sure if we have any technical questions, that Mr. Thomas will help us here. But as you will see, the recommendations, I would just only say that as the chair of the committee, that to me this did reflect the information that came from the committee. I was somewhat disappointed at the delegation that was made tonight, as I do believe there were opportunities for delegations to our committee if there was displeasure in some of the areas that we were looking at, and some of the explanation. But there was a lot of technical background and a number of engineers on the committee, and some of the things that we looked at, and I know there was mention about some of the things about looking outside and outside of the committee or outside of the municipality for some of the answers to our sourcing. Where is it? And also having to remove item number 5. I think this is all part of a package. I don't think that by us investigating opportunities to close roads, bridges, and reduce it by us looking at these opportunities means that it's going to happen. I think that we have tough decisions within our community, and these are things that we have to look at, along with looking at changing our zoning, along with looking at our infrastructure assets, at looking at many different things. So I think that it is a good opportunity to have a refreshed look at this compared to the list that was there before. But I hope that these recommendations will pass, and that we can move forward with them. So I know if there's any technical questions, I'll turn them over to Thomas. It'd just be much easier to do that. I do believe that we really do need to, as a municipality, petition the government and the federal government further for funding for our infrastructure. It has been very difficult since everything has been downloaded to the municipalities. So again, it's just, and again, and even item number 7, based on increased frequency and magnitude of storms, reviewing the design of flood standards, I think is very important moving forward for our community. We've just heard a report of what's going on in Erie. We know what's happened in Tilbury. We've had incidents in Wallaceburg, so I think it's very, very important, again, to move that one. And maybe I'll just shut up. Maybe I should have just let it go and we would have just passed it.
Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I could tell that Mr. Lawson was quite frustrated with the meetings, just in his voice. And I got to tell you, number 5 is just kicking my rear end, because we fought to have tons of bridges taken off of the list, and now it looks like we're getting more put on, or a very good chance of getting more put on. Not happy with that at all. Would we close down a bridge on, say, Richmond Street if there's 18 businesses on that bridge along there? No, we wouldn't do that. And to every farmer that's on this road, whether they live on it or they farm on it, that's a business to every farmer that's out there. So if we have 12 to 18 farms on that road and we're closing down the bridge, that's 12 or 18 businesses that we're starting to hurt right there. We talk about cutting red tape, and we're making more red tape every day for the farmers, and I don't understand. I don't know if we need somebody from the farm community to step up and say, look, this is what you're doing to us, and this is making us drive another 8 or 10 miles. We're going on different roads. A perfect example of this would be Pollard Line. Before that bridge was replaced, we had farm vehicles, going up onto the 401, because that's the way it goes at the particular area. They have to go up onto the farm, onto the ramp, and then off to get to their fields. So I hope that we can come up with something and maybe a little more innovative than what we seem to be doing at the moment, because closing bridges isn't the answer to any kind of business. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan.
So my question through you, Mr. Mayor, is to Mr. Kelly. Around item number 5, can you talk about what the process would be in terms of the investigating opportunities to close roads and bridges? And is public input going to be sought? And are things like Councillor Oche had mentioned in terms of road safety and traffic also considered? What's that look like?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So these are recommendations, first of all, from the committee. I was just a support on the committee. So we had technical, a group, as well as representatives from the farming community, and they agreed with this recommendation. I think you can see the amount of pressures that we have on our infrastructure. We presented the budget earlier, and we're only 53% funded on all of our assets right now. We had just a presentation on Lake Erie, which I can tell you the numbers are astronomical as far as the costs go, and we don't have a penny set aside for that. So I think we need to do everything we can, not only innovation, but also look at our inventory. The process would be that we would look at the low use roads. We'd look at the businesses. We'd look at how it impacts the public. And that statement, the minimum impact to the public, actually came from one of the members of the KFA to the report when we sent it around to the committee. That was his addition, make sure we engage the public. So that's absolutely our intent. None of these are easy decisions, but the committee also said very strongly there are a number of roads out there that are just used minimally. Could we sell them to the farming community? Are there other options? So that's what we're looking at. Again, just trying to be creative. It is a very challenging task, to say the least, because everybody can make an argument it's not possible to move or to close a bridge. We currently have 5 bridges closed within Chatham-Kent now, and the other critical part of that is that we never would look at closing a bridge where there wasn't an alternative. So, for example, I can tell you there's an example we have right now that to replace the bridge is going to be about $2.5 million. There is one house on this road, and there's about 3 farms. So the inconvenience factor is around a 10 to 15 minute drive. That's what we're looking at because we're not replacing the bridge. That's a good example of what the committee was considering. Those are opportunities. Do we really need to spend $2.5 million on a new bridge when, in all rights, you could offer to pay that resident for the inconvenience for 200 years before you spend that kind of money? So it's that type of financial creative thinking that we are looking at more on a practical level. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. Thank you for your insight, Mr. Kelly. I just want to make the quick comment that all of these items here and these recommendations point to kind of a dual problem that we have. So we have a lot of inventory, as Thomas just mentioned. We are also significantly underfunding our infrastructure, and our council is going to have conversations on budget or during budget about infrastructure funding. If we do not increase our funding towards infrastructure, then we are going to continue to dig ourselves into a deeper and deeper hole. So just for my colleagues to consider.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, as far as the infrastructure funding, we'll never get to where we should be because a lot of the stuff was built at the same time and it's now decaying at the same time. So the cost is crazy. And over the last 8 years, we've done our best. Like, we've certainly put a lot of money into infrastructure, not as much as requested, but, I don't think we'll ever get to what the request would be. But my comment is, Thomas, you touched on it very briefly, and I've thought about this before. And you don't have to comment on it because it's probably a crazy idea that won't go anywhere. But anyway, I felt that I should probably just say it anyway. I like the idea of selling these roads. Farms are big nowadays. There's not, 15 family small farms, right? The farms have conglomerated, they're large. So just in kind of a theoretical kind of way, if you have a bridge that's very underused, used primarily by, say, 1 or 2 farmers, could be one farm owner that owns each side. If you could sell that road to that farmer for $1, then it becomes private property. They can use the bridge as they will. They can repair the bridge as they want, but it's no longer the liability of the municipality. And if there was some sort of signage that says private property around, I think that may be agreeable because I've had some people come into the cleaners that have said, you know, if I could pay to fix the bridge, I'd pay for it. Like, it's worth it for me. But I say, well, yeah, but we don't do that. Like, you know, I can't say, oh, put in a stop sign, I'll pay for it. That's not the way the things work, right? But I like the idea of divesting, and I think it may be agreeable in some cases to make it private property. And you just mentioned it for a second there. I just thought I'd kind of highlight what you said because I think it's a great idea. And that's all. Thanks.
Councillor Latimer?
I just want to, I want a mere clarification on this. When we divest property and let's say we sell that property at a minimal cost to the farmer, do they not take on, well, we don't own it, they do they not automatically take on the obligations to meet the Drainage Act requirements and any other provincial mandate that's out there on property, like a standard with regard to drainage especially? And if they do so, if they decide to take that on, that may be their prerogative, but the people around them will also bear the brunt. Would they not? Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So you're giving a very specific example where
not really. We have a lot of drains.
Yeah, but they're municipal drains, right? Municipal drains follow the Drainage Act, and you know, it is a possibility that we'd have to, I think, really figure that one out. That if it's a drain now that we service, and it's under the Drainage Act,
that's right.
I don't think it is a bylaw, so you couldn't forego your obligations.
Correct.
To do that. However, part of the deal that we cut is we sell them the land and we offer to continue maintaining the drain, for example.
Oh.
Right.
Okay. So, alrighty.
It's all in the negotiations.
Yeah. Well, it is all in the negotiations, but I'm just questioning whether or not, you know, that individual or that landowner is thinking they're getting a good bang for their buck, but in the end, you may be decreasing the municipal costs, but you're really impacting their out-of-pocket costs that they may not fully recognize. And I know that's not that's their due diligence. It's not really our due diligence, but it also has a real impact on their neighbors and us as a municipality. If Farmer A up there doesn't take care of a drain, and I'm not talking about the 3-foot culvert, I'm talking about the longer drains there in Chatham and Dover Township in particular, that may have a real, what am I going to say, negative impact on us as a municipality. We're down here, or their neighbors.
So thank you, Mayor Caniff. So part of the process would be we would study the opportunities first, and we'd take the low-hanging fruit per se. Something like you describe is obviously more complex, but you know, I think there are opportunities. The committee felt there were opportunities out there where we had very low-use roads, and as a result, we could look at some type of sale. And I think that we could work through any particular details related to the Drainage Act.
Yeah, I have one more question with regard to the liabilities too. That they buy the road. If someone buys the road, and they close it off, well, they automatically close off for emergency crew, right? Access. If they don't close it off, and a member of the public goes down there and has a problem or causes an issue, are they not liable? Then the landowner or the road owner now is liable.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So it is a private piece of land now, right. So we would have to treat it as a private. So it's like going on someone's driveway. Right. Exactly. It would fall under the same legal obligations.
Right. Again, due diligence on part of the person who's purchasing the road. Yeah.
Seeing no other questions. Oh, Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you. I'd just follow up to that. So I just want to and I've had a lot of discussion and some really good comments about it. And I know it is, when we look in the last list of bridges to divest, the issues and the conversations that we had around this table were all very difficult and some very passionate over areas and bridges within their area. This recommendation is simply to investigate some opportunities. We looked at bridges before. We didn't look at roads. And I think this is, we do know, regardless whether it's my backyard or your backyard, we have infrastructure and things we need to look at. And if we don't do and investigate the opportunities, how will we know what we can do and what we can't do? So this is simply to investigate the opportunities, which I think needs to be done. We're looking at doing a comprehensive official plan, and we got the 5-year plan coming up. Like, I think, and we talk about looking at buildings, this is just all a part of that whole look at what we have within this municipality and where we need to go in the future.
Okay, thanks. Let's put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-1.
14C.
14C, motion by Councillor Roche regarding security cameras in municipal parks.
Councillor Roche.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I had a call, asked if I would change my notice of motion, and at the time I was quite upset. And so I spoke to some other people. I decided that I will change the motion, so it's a surprise to Judy here. That Chatham-Kent return a report to use security cameras in at least 3 of the following locations due to the consistent vandalism to the restrooms. Whereas Uriel restrooms are vandalized on an almost yearly basis, and whereas Wellisburg's Glen Mickle Park restrooms have been vandalized, and whereas Tilbury Memorial Park has been a constant area being vandalized on an almost yearly basis, and whereas the security cameras may be much cheaper in the long run than just fixing the restrooms and having the vandalism continue in the future. Whereas there may be more parks that are having the same problem that can be added to the list of parks to have security cameras installed and pay this over our 4-year term of council. I'd like a cost, sorry, I can't even read my own writing. I'd like a cost to be put forward on the cameras in the parks, put on in the cameras on a taller pole where they are not reachable to be stolen. As well, I would like an approximate cost on all vandalism across Chatham-Kent this past year. Thank you.
It's going to take a while to get that up. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Thompson? Okay, Councillor McGregor? Actually, sorry, I'll go back to Councillor Roche.
Thank you. I believe the reason I've changed this is I was told that the police thought they may have other ways of taking care of this, but I don't see any police here to even give me a shout to let me know what their thoughts are. So I'm going to leave this with management to take care of and hopefully ask the police what they are thinking about. Mr. Bray, if I could ask you a question. I'm not positive that Tilbury's restrooms have been fixed yet. I believe they're waiting for the spring.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I just hate to see these be fixed, Glen Mickles be fixed, and have the same thing done again. If we need to, and we need to do just a trial, I think the 3 places that I commented on would be great to start off, because 2 of them are going to be rebuilt shortly in the spring, being Tilbury and being Gary Mickle Park. But it's a constant thing, and I don't know why nothing has been done to this day, because I know Tilbury, this is definitely not the first time, as I spoke to the manager at the parks, and it seemed to take me to bring a motion forward before anything was asked to be done. So I don't know what our problem is with that. As you can tell, I'm a little ticked off about this whole thing. Because it's constant in Area O, and now I'm being told Gary Mickle Park is not the first time it's been hit as well. So something needs to be done, because obviously nothing's helping. We fix it up, we tear it down. We got $10,000 basically worth of bathroom repairs and 2 bathrooms. So I believe cameras myself would maybe stop this unnecessary vandalism and from happening again and again. And I don't know, I would have never thought of putting a camera low enough that somebody could even bring a 7-foot ladder and steal it. So, so as far as that goes, I'm a little upset. Somebody would think that I would think that, hey, that's a good idea. Let's put a camera right here and I can unscrew it and take it home tonight. But so as you can tell, I'm getting a little upset with people vandalizing our parks with money spent by probably their parents, actually, as well, paying taxes, just like the rest of us here and everybody that's out watching this right now. So if there's something that we can do and something does need to be done, cameras, is, as far as I'm concerned, seems to be the best bet because obviously the police can't sit in the parks for 24 hours a day watching to see who's in there and who's breaking what. But anyways, I'm hoping that you'll at least back me on a report coming back on what the cost would be for this particular item in different parks. And I'm sure there are more parks, and that's why I put on there that that they could be added as needed. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, comment?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just for your information, we currently have 26 different cameras located in arenas, beach pavilions, parking lots, playground areas, beach areas, and also in the cemetery. So they're out there right now. It's not that we don't have 0 cameras. There's actually 26 out there. That's just in parks and open spaces.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Thomas, for letting me know that, because I had no information on that at all. But and how are they working as far as fighting vandalism?
Just if I can interject, Mr. Mayor, we're really going into discussions that probably best discussed in closed session for obvious reasons, if that makes sense.
Yep.
If I may, can I just get an answer? Has it cut any? All right. Thank you.
I understand, Mr. Mayor, what Councillor Oche wants. Councillor Oche wants. I think we all want the same thing. We want to stop the vandalism. This is probably a great discussion in closed session. Just don't want it to be telling the bad guys on TV who are watching all of our secrets around our cameras.
Okay, Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you very much. I think that actually answers one of the questions I was going to ask, so I'm okay with that. Happy to second and support Councillor Oche's, even the amended motion. I think it's an important step. We've worked a little bit together to bring something like this forward. It's really important for the community of Erie-O. They've been asking for quite some time. They get vandalized down there on a, I'd say, weekly, at best monthly basis. So looking forward, I'm glad to see the motion is taking a more wholesome approach, fulsome approach. So looking forward to this coming back. Is there any timeline as to when we could possibly see this report return?
Mr. Kelly, any thoughts on that?
I'd like to, thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'd like to review with my staff. We're consumed with budget right now, and we just want to see our way through that, and then we can get started on this type of analysis. Thank you.
Councillor Oche. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I know you're giving me some lenience here. I actually meant to put that on there. I'd like to see it back before we have the bathrooms done, if possible, so that we don't fix the bathrooms in the spring and then they're tore apart again. So if the spring, April would work for you, Thomas, that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I appreciate Councillor Oche's frustration and many individuals' frustration at ongoing vandalism. I guess my concern with the motion is the focus on video cameras. So for obvious reasons, you can't put a video camera in a bathroom. I think we agree with that. And I'm just not sure that it's appropriate that we advocate our answer or our solution to a problem. I think you've identified a problem, an ongoing problem. I think it might be more reasonable to task administration with offering some probable solutions. So I would hate for a report to come back that just focuses on cameras and we kind of decide, you know what, that's not going to be the best option. It's not going to have the desired effect. I'd like to see other options, and I think I'd like to see what the life cycle budget is for washrooms. I think you can anticipate some level of vandalism in a public space like that. How we're accounting for that, and then what other options are. Should we increase signage around Crime Stoppers? Are there other things that we can do to motivate the community to take an active role in preventing this type of vandalism? So I would support this if it came back just as a report, but I don't think I could support something that's just tasking administration with telling us how much cameras will be and eventually leading to directing them to install those.
Councillor Harrigan?
So again, I think, Mark, thank you for being such a strong advocate for some of our parks and open spaces. This motion really speaks to that. I was going to offer a friendly amendment similar to Councillor McGregor's with a report on putting security cameras or other preventative measures to prevent vandalism in at least 3. So if the police department does have an alternative measure, we could then consider that maybe it's something more effective or something that's being piloted in other communities. So that's just a request for a friendly amendment.
Councillor Oche, are you open for that?
No, I'm not, actually. And I'll tell you why. Because if this has been happening for years now, why do we not have a resolution for this already? This has been going on for many years, many more years than I've been a councillor, as this is only my 5th year. So I'm sorry, but it could have been done 5 years ago. It could have been done 10 years ago in Area O. So sorry, but I'm not open to that.
Okay, I support it in principle, or Councillor Oche, I really do. I guess I could put a motion forward to add the clause, a report on putting security cameras and also other preventative means of reducing vandalism in at least 3 of the following locations.
Yes, you can do that. You need a seconder. Councillor B. McGregor? Any discussion related to that particular change? Councillor Thompson?
Just really need a point of clarification. Councillor Harrigan at one point said or, and then at the other point she said and. So if it's cameras and, I like it. Cameras or, I'm opposed because signs don't do anything.
Right. I'm going with the and. Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Okay. Is that up there yet? No.
Mayor Caniff, actually, with the and, I would support that.
All right, so we don't need a vote then if you're support. The seconder, who's the seconder?
Trevor Thompson. Councillor Thompson.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Thompson, you're okay with that? Okay, so we don't need to do a vote on that, so we're just going to change the wording on this.
Sorry, I'll be more careful with my 3-letter words or less.
And while we're waiting for that change, Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor Finn.
Yeah. I'm sorry, just Mayor Caniff, if I could, I had just one more comment. I also think Councillor Oche's comments about being proactive are really pointed and should be noted by our EMT. So this has been an ongoing issue. It's wonderful that we're bringing these forward and asking EMT or the municipality to act on it. Ideally, it's proactively brought forward, and there's proactive conversations that happen for these types of issues. So I think that's a bit of a culture change that we'll have to push the municipality to. But I did want to note that I think it's a pointed comment, Councillor Oche.
Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Kind of around all of it, I'm thinking that from my experience, you need to have all of these things that complement each other. The cameras and CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. We need to look at why is it so easy to target these washrooms? Is it the entrance? Is it isolated? Put the cameras up so you have all these crime deterrents. So I'd like to see all of that in a package because that's what's going to make it work. It's the whole process around it, right? We can put all the cameras up you want, but they know how to put the hoodies over their heads and go in and do it, right? And then you got a picture of a fella in a hoodie or whoever. But you need to have all of those things in place, and it's a full crime prevention package. Cameras, CEPTED, community awareness, all of those things. So I'd like to see that if all rolled into one. It's getting there, but I feel like it's really long. I'm sure it's all in there, but that's my thought process is all of these things are good things, but individually, you won't have the impact that you should have with all of it together.
And does the and also other preventative means, which I think would capture everything you talked about there. That's what we just added in.
Including SEPTED audits on the premises.
That we considered it as other preventative means.
It is, yeah.
Does that cover off then?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm just making a friendly suggestion.
Councilor Finn, you're
welcome. Yeah.
Councilor Scotchy?
Through you, Your Worship, just had a quick question for actually Mr. Norton in regards to a quick question. Is it possible to institute a bylaw for people that are caught doing that to exceed like a greater fine than just a criminal code? It might be something that we can't do, but is there something that we can do that has an posting for an elevated fine? Maybe it's not something we can do, but if it's a slight deterrence, although I don't think signs work, but if somebody is caught, it would be able to hold them to a higher standard of punitive damage.
Mr. Mayor, I'd have to check into that, but generally the criminal code is considered the most punitive means of dealing with behavior that's especially this type of behavior. So we'll have to check into what we can do. Additionally, we can certainly seek civil damages, although the people who get caught are usually not people who can afford to fix what they're damaging. But we can, take those kinds of steps. There's other things we can do, like, for example, we could, if the community is very upset about it, if, for example, through the criminal process, there's often an opportunity for the community to give input at the sentencing, we could show up and make representations about how this has a negative impact on our community, beyond the costs, in terms of it just being a very much impacting to people's morale and et cetera, et cetera. So, but I can look into your specific request. I don't know the answer right now.
It was just more a question just to see, and I would like to definitely let you know that if that ever does come a case where we can advocate on behalf of the municipality where somebody is caught doing that, I'm sure there's everybody at this table would do their best to endeavor to give a statement in regards to the process it has on the taxpayers and how much it cost us. So I know I would definitely be up for that. Thank you.
Councillor Hall?
Just really briefly, I'd like to thank Councillor Oche for bringing this this motion forward, and I'm glad to hear that we're going to get a report back. So I think we'll be able to look at this again and look at some more details and some more information. Obviously, it's a little fresh here too with the situation in Wallaceburg that happened at Glenmickle Park. So I'll look forward to getting this report. I just want to mention, I won't go through all of it, but I did reach out after Councillor Oche put forward the notice of motion at the last meeting to the Wallaceburg Neighborhood Watch Group. They provided some great feedback, so I will forward that over to staff to be included in this report, hopefully when we pass it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can we put this to vote?
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
15, corporate services.
Item 15A, council compensation.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor C. McGregor. Discussion. Councillor Hall.
Just a couple of questions to staff. What led to the review committee being formed, and how was the review committee selected?
Thank you, Your Worship. Back in a couple of years ago, the sitting council of the day wanted to have council compensation reviewed, and in 2016 they passed a motion to have a citizens review committee appointed. That citizens review committee, we went out, sent an expression of interest out to the community to see individuals who might be interested in sitting on that particular committee. The intention was that council were looking for a collection of people who might represent a cross-section of skills, business acumen, compensation background, perhaps board and governance experience, and also geographically represented to the extent possible. So we took the individuals who applied through the expression of interest, council approved that list, and they were then brought forward to review the base compensation and benefits, etc. That was late 2016. They brought a report forward in January of 2017. And then that particular committee was resurrected by council's request this past year to review the exemption of the 1/3 tax matter.
Okay, thank you. Another question: Where does Chatham-Kent sit in comparison to neighboring and like municipalities in terms of salary?
Thank you, Your Worship. Right now, we're waiting to get some updated information from other municipalities. We went out in the fall to update the data that we had. Where we were at that point in time was that the mayoral position probably fell pretty close to the market at that point in time. The data for councillors was a fair bit lower to the market. And so some of the municipalities are also sorting through how they're going to deal with the elimination of the tax exemption. So they all haven't finalized their figures for 2019.
Okay, perfect. That's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Through you to Kathy, can you explain the difference to honorarium versus salary? It appears as though we're...
Your Worship, honorarium is simply the term used to denote the compensation paid to the mayor and members of council.
There was a report, actually, that I think Councillor Hall circulated to the members of council that spoke to some communities offering an honorarium and some offering a salary, and it was unclear to me what the difference was.
So, Your Worship, salary is generally a term that we use to talk about employees, where honorarium is referred to as our mayor and council.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to speak a bit about maybe more informational and sort of clarifying, because I read in the media that we were going to get there's a recommendation that we were going to get an increase. And that isn't quite the way this works out for most of the, at least for the council. In fact, this is all comes about because the federal government changed the rules that were in existence for over 50 years. And I don't know that the general public understands that. The rules for at least 50 years have been that 1/3 of the honorarium that a councillor gets was tax-free. Okay, that understood. I hope the public who are listening are going to follow this. In 2018, well, actually, I think back to 2004 was the last time the council's honorarium was increased. We were probably foolish, quite frankly. We were probably foolish in October or in November of 2016 when these people the Citizens Committee did a heck of a job and made a recommendation that made a whole bunch of sense. But that's democracy. But just look at the facts. And I'm going to try to use round numbers so everybody who's listening at home or wherever they may be, maybe writing behind me, can understand it. I guess our honorarium was a little more than $27,000 last year, but it's easier to divide if it's 20. I'm not the chief financial officer, so I can't do it quite as quick as Mr. Turner could. So if you had $27,000 and 1/3 of it's tax-free, that's $9,000 that you get tax-free. All members of council are probably in different tax brackets. The highest tax bracket is, Mr. Accountant?
54%.
Right. So just to make it, again, easier for me to divide, we'll choose the 50%, and I'll show you the 40 and the 30 after that. So that leaves $18,000 after you've got your tax-free amount. Correct? Everybody follows that? 50% of $18,000 is, again, $9,000. The person who's getting $27,000 in 2018 gets net $18,000. Everybody follow that? There shouldn't be any disagreement about that. So now instead, the Trudeau government changes the rules that have been in place for 50 years. We have a recommendation the council goes up to $32,000. Same person in the 50% tax bracket, not too hard to figure out. They're now down to $16,000. That's if this passes tonight. So they go from $18,000 in December of 2018 as their net honorarium because of Monsieur Trudeau. They get 16. Did they get a pay increase, an honorarium increase? Well, obviously not. They actually lose $2,000. Now, if they're in a higher tax bracket, they get hit even harder. So those are the numbers. At 40%, it's a smaller amount, but it's still a cut from the year before. And 30 the same. Now you get down to 20%, it's not, but it's not an increase. What this is, it's not an increase to the individual counselor. They're not going to end up with as much as they did before. What it does is it's a good attempt and a good recommendation, hopefully we'll follow it this time, that says we're trying to make up for the stupid move that was made in Ottawa because they can't run their government without deficits. You know our budget. We discussed it at a presentation earlier. We can't run deficits. Not the same in Ottawa. So now they found a whole new tax category. We're just little Chatham-Kent. But you can imagine in other bigger municipalities where they get paid more. And when they add all that up, they've found a new source of taxes. And they've downloaded it to the people of Chatham-Kent. Well, thank you, Mr. Trudeau. And that's what this is really about. And I think that that's what the public ought to understand. Because I can tell you the members of council who are sitting around here are going to get less in their pockets. The amount that shows is going to go up, and the amount that's in your genes, which is how people really measure things, is going to be down. And I'm pointing that out for all members of council. Yeah, sure, it affects me. I heard Henry. What it really affects for me is that there's about $2,000 to $2,500 to $3,000 less that I'll be able to donate to charities. But everybody has their own situation, but the bottom line of it is it's going to go up and we're going to get less. But I think people need to understand that because it's a fundamental change in the way councillors receive their honorariums. And that's all. Nobody's getting fat sitting around these tables who are members of the council. Anyway, there was no question there. It's just that I think that the public deserves to hear what actually happened because otherwise they're led to believe that everybody's going to have more jingle in their jeans, and it's just not the case.
Councilor Latimer?
I would like to thank, or through the mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor Solomon for explaining that very clearly to us in his earlier email to us as a council, but also to the general public. But I think what constituents who have contacted me over the past weekend, very much concerned about where we're going to find that $97,000 to put the extra jingle in our pockets, as you say. And so that's, I just like if Mr. Turner could comment on that, because I think that the public is looking for that answer.
Through your worship, as Councillor Solomon alluded to, this is being transferred to the taxpayers of Chatham-Kent by the 2019 budget. Yeah.
And just to clarify one other question we heard earlier, just as far as what allows us to vote on compensation, could Mr. Norton, could you confer, sorry, Kathy, could you?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act makes a provision for council members to be exempt from having to declare a pecuniary interest around decisions that you make with respect to your honorarium allowances and other such things. It would go to reason that if you had to declare a conflict on that, then none of you would be able to vote on this item, and you would be forever in limbo on the matter. So that's the answer, Mr. Mayor.
Seeing Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Scotchie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in a better mood on this one. And it's not because I'm getting a raise, because I was actually going to vote against this originally, because I was thinking, you know what, I know what I was making last year. I guess I didn't realize how much of a cut. And as Councillor Solomon has said, that about giving money to charity, and that's one thing that I've definitely increased this year through Chatham-Kent, and I thank the management for that, allow us to give to different items through our pay deduction, which I think helps out many different charities in this city and in Chatham-Kent as well. But I am in a better mood because I want to make this clear, not because of a raise or anything, because it's not a raise, as Councillor Solomon was able to show us that it's not a raise at all. We're still lower than what we were 4 years ago. But I want to make clear that everybody knows that council doesn't have an expense account. But I hear it all the time. People think, hey, you know, don't worry about it. You're not just making that. You get an expense account. Well, I don't have an expense account, and if I do, I'd like to have been told about it. But anyways, just my thoughts are everyone in here has put their afterlife after work basically on hold because you're at a lot more meetings than this Monday night meeting. I don't know how many people are on what councils, but I know everybody's on at least 4 besides our regular Chatham-Kent Council Monday night, as well as other meetings such as tomorrow night in Tilbury for the budget. So I just hope everybody understands the actual pay cut that we are going to be taking, which is a couple $1,000s for most of us, and as well as that we're not just here on Monday nights. This is a 40-hour week job without a problem. And 4 years ago when I started, I was making basically minimum wage because I was putting 40 hours in at this job, and I'm putting 40 hours, actually I'm putting probably more like 50 to 60 hours in at my other job, which is my business. But I hope people realize that we're not out trying to gouge the taxpayers now. We're just trying to make close to what we were making 4 years ago for the older people, sorry, maybe not older people, but the people that were on council before, and for the new councillors who should be able to make more than minimum wage when you're working 40 hours as well. And then I guess the last thing is that I just hope you realize the hours that we really do put in, and the different, like I say, the different councils that we're on, boards and different things like that. And my phone is beside me every day, every night. So it's not like I'm not on call, I guess you might say. There's been times when I've been out at 3 a.m. helping neighbors with things such as a large storm that we had in Tilbury, and yesterday I was out shoveling people's driveways, and that's something that I do it as maybe not for council itself, but people know who I am and what I'm out there for, and it is for the good of Chatham-Kent. So I hope everybody realizes that this is not a raise at all. Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy?
It's actually a quick question for Kathy, through you, Your Worship. So just a little bit about the committee, Kathy. So this is a very impartial committee? Because I know some people on the street have said to me, well, you guys know the committee, and I can speak for myself and the new councillors for sure that we have never met anybody on the committee before. So can you just touch base a little bit in regards to kind of how they would go about it? So basically we've seen a lot of the reports, we've seen a lot of the numbers. So do they basically just go look around the outside of the municipality and kind of see where all the other municipalities are doing and where they stand in regards to honorarium, and that's how they kind of base their decision?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, in part. So what happens is, so first of all, once the committee was established, yes, it's a neutral committee, and they are made up of representatives across our municipality. Data is gathered with respect to comparator municipalities to come up with what the base rate, we'll call it, for mayor and councillor positions. They also examined other elements in their first pass-through, not in this last review that they did. That wasn't the mandate that council provided for them. But so yes, they do data analysis. The people who sit on the committee come from backgrounds including business owners, compensation consultant specialists, people who have board and governance experience, people who work and represent businesses in the community. And so together they came up with the recommendations that you see before you tonight. Certainly administration supported them in terms of shepherding the process to get a report to council and so forth, but the recommendations that you'll vote on tonight are those represented by the committee. And if you give me just a moment of indulgence, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, we have 3 of the committee members who are here tonight, and I would certainly like to acknowledge them. We have Derek McGivern, Gail Hunt, and Yuli Bondi sitting behind me. If you could just wave your hands, folks. And Colette Annetts was also a part of the committee and not able to be here, but yes, certainly feel free to give them a clap. They returned, yes. They returned to do this work following the work that council asked them to do back in 2016, 2017, and they were gracious enough to return to do this work that council asked of them again this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we can put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-2.
15B. Can I get a motion? Councillor Solomon.
Move.
Second. The seconder. Councillor B. McGregor. Discussion? Seeing none, we can put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 16A, Chatham Hope Nonprofit Housing Replacement Unit for 98 McGuigan Avenue, Chatham.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Kirkwood-White. Any questions? Seeing none, we can put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 16B, Municipal Capital Facilities Bylaw for Affordable Housing Project at 45 Mitchener Road, Chatham.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor C. McGregor. Any questions? Seeing none, we can put it to vote.
Councillor Kirkwood-White. Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Chief Administrative Office. Item 17A, motion by Councillor Kirkwood-White regarding composition of Community Partnership Fund Review Committee.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I have actually had a lot of feedback.
Just a little closer, yeah. Can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me now?
Don't be shy. Speak up.
Okay. I've actually had a lot of feedback as a result of this motion that I read out last Monday, not only from some municipal staff, but other councillors and some members of the general public as well. And the comments have been mixed. But the feedback has resulted in an amendment to the motion that I read out last Monday. And I'll forego all the whereases because the second last paragraph is the one that I would like to comment on. And the way it reads now is that I would like administration to report back to council with a proposed method of recruitment to ensure that the composition of the Partnership Fund Review Committee consists of a maximum of 5 municipal staff members, together with a minimum of 8 community volunteers who are knowledgeable about and actively engaged in the nonprofit and charitable sector, and further that these volunteers be recruited from each of the wards within Chatham-Kent, and that such recruitment process be confirmed and completed before the 2019 fund distribution process commences. And the reason for that is I too advocate for citizen review. I think it's very important that local citizens have a say in decisions that affect them. I understand at the moment that this Community Partnership Committee, and I'm not proposing a new committee. It's an existing committee that I'm simply asking that the composition be changed. At the moment, I understand that there are anywhere from 12 to 15 municipal staff that are involved in this process, and I would just like to see a little bit of a switch in the composition to involve more local citizens, which is the way it used to be done, and it's very similar to the way that the Community Foundation, the United Way, and the Ontario Trillium Foundation allocates their funds to communities. So this is our money. This is taxpayers' money, and I would like to see more taxpayers engaged in this process. So I would like to move that motion.
Okay. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Latimer. Questions? Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at this in a different perspective. We've had the system in place for a long time, and staff were doing it, and in my opinion, they were doing a good job. I have heard no complaint about the handling of funds. I know one thing I do hear is there's not enough money, and there's not enough money to support all the initiatives that are out there. I've asked people in my community who are very involved in applying for the funding to see if they had an issue with the process, and they had no issue with the process. I've been here a long time, and I feel that if there was an issue, I'm sure that I would have heard there's a problem with the funding, and I don't hear that. We went out to community groups and presented our willingness to support groups, and I never heard one complaint about how the system was failing. The other point I'd like to make is a person that's sitting on that committee from the public might feel uncomfortable because it might involve a project they're involved with, or they might support a project, their project, over another project. In my opinion, it opens the door for some favoritism to be applied to the application process. So therefore, I will not be supporting the recommendation.
Councillor Harrigan.
So just to offer an alternative perspective to what Councillor Foss has said, and I appreciate the feedback, Councillor Foss, and your experience that you bring to the table. While I was on the campaign trail and in some of our meetings, issues were brought up around transparency, questions about reporting, and I think even if you are an organization or a community that hasn't had any challenges with this grant review process, involving citizens in the adjudication process to choose where tax dollars are going improves transparency and it improves public engagement, and those things ultimately are good things, I believe. I agree that there could be conflicts if people are involved in the committee, but at that point they would be, I would assume, expected to declare conflict of interest and let their peers adjudicate. So I'll be supporting this motion. I think it's a positive step forward, and I want to thank Councillor Kirkwood-White for incorporating some of my suggestions into her motion.
Councillor Thompson?
I see both sides of it, but more than 50%, I actually agree with Councillor Foss there. But I did have a question. This is similar, and I think Councillor Foss alluded to, this is similar to the way we used to run it about 10 years ago, was it not? Yeah. I do believe in conversations with some members of the community that it was, and we moved away from that to move it directly to staff. I totally agree with Councillor Harrigan. Getting more people involved is an important thing. I don't know that that addresses this. I see this as I don't know how to see this, truth be told. I got more viewpoints than MC Escher. The problem is now it's an unelected body, and now it gets into a more political realm. And if we're going to do that, why don't we just sit here and go through it line by line? Well, the reason we don't is because it turns into the capital budget. So I think the big issue is there's not enough money in it. And in Blenheim, I spoke to an organizer of the Blenheim Car Show. He had nothing but great things to say about the current setup. Thought it was a fantastic system. He admitted that, you know, the first couple of times you do it, you go through the process, it can be confusing. And that's an issue that I think we need to address, and potentially that the committee should look at it, because I think this is going to pass. However, I don't think that this solves the problem we're really trying to address. I think it's going to slow it down, and I think potentially it could end up like an active lifestyle committee that's going to resign if we spend too much time messing around with their recommendations. And at the same time, I think we're going to hear too many complaints that now it's an unelected body making decisions, and they're going to say, rightly or wrongly, these individuals making these comments, that they're just patting each other on the back because that's how it's going to work. And I don't think that's fair, but I think that's the perception we're going to have to deal with.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I agree with, well, most of the comments, which is a challenge.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Just a comment with regard to other comments that I've heard about the staff being overworked. And, you know, we're going into budget right now. There are a number of staff members, 12 to 15 of them, that are actively involved in this process. There have been some postings on Facebook in the last couple of days from people who were involved in the process before, basically saying that it took a lot of time. And if people are overworked, this is one way that volunteers can help out.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a point of clarification. So if this report comes back and it's only a report and we don't like it, we can vote against it at that point and remain status quo, correct? That's all. Thank you.
Clarify that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that's correct. Councillor Kirkwood-White was great, consulted with a number of us. The other thing that we would also be prepared to offer back to council as part of the report is something along the lines of a terms of reference. So things like pecuniary interest, or you shouldn't be voting for a project that your club's involved with, or things like that, common sense. So Amy's already got a bunch of that drafted after having talked to members of council over the last couple of days. So this is a report. I think it'll give council some comfort. And if it's not already clear, any recommendations for how money would be allocated, come back to this chamber. So elected officials are ultimately accountable for how the money's going to be distributed. It wouldn't be this group that gets to sign the check. So this is just a process to get more involvement. That's my understanding of how this is written right now.
I'm sorry. May I?
Councillor Thompson, yeah.
I hate to get caught in the verbiage. There was a former councillor that used to do that a lot. But the way I read this is administration report back to council with a proposed method of recruitment, and that the rest of it's pretty much a go-ahead. that we're only asking for the report on the recruitment, not on the rest of it. And that's just how I read it. I'm not sure. I would like some clarification, maybe some language changed. I don't know. But I'm not sure if other people read it that way too.
Yeah, respectfully, that's what I think the group's going to need. Given that 12 staff or whatever it is are currently involved, you can direct staff through to my office to do whatever you like, and that's your prerogative. We're reporting to you. If we're going to have citizens coming up and they're going to be actually asked to carry out a function on behalf of council or delegated through, I think having some basic terms of reference and what's expected, I think would assist them with completing their tasks and clarify the process so it doesn't get overly burdensome. So that was the intent.
Mr. Mayor, just briefly, it would be helpful if you clarified, though, whether this is an advisory committee that does report back to council and council makes the ultimate decision, or whether your intention here is to delegate authority to this committee. They would take a lump sum perhaps given to council and just disperse the funds without reporting back to council.
Councillor Kirkwood-White, can you clarify which one you were thinking?
Yes, the recommendations will come back to this body.
But are you looking at it to be an advisory committee, so the ultimately does come back to here to approve?
That's correct.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Sakachi? All votes are in. Motion passes 13-3.
Number 18, closed session reports.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I would move the closed session council session of January 21st tonight. Absent were Councillors McGrail and Pinsnell. Council directed administration on personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, with regard to Integris board member appointment, section 2392B of the Municipal Act. Litigation or potential litigation and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with regard to year-end litigation report, section 2392E and F of the Municipal Act. Potential acquisition of land by the municipality with regard to property on King Street, Chatham, section 2392C. And council received information on personal matters about identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, with regard to lesson learned report 107 Cafe, section 2392B of the Municipal Act.
19, approval of communication items.
Need a seconder and a pass it.
We got way past that. Seconder, Karen Kirkwood, or Councillor Kirkwood-White. All in favor? Oh, I'm trying to.
Councillor Crew, Oche, and Sakachi. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
19A, approval of the January 21st, 2019 Council Information Package. Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Oche. All in favor? Opposed? Non-agenda business items. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Well, before you say it, I just want to commend our mayor and his wife for jumping in the pool on Saturday and generating a significant amount of money for the polar plunge and the Special Olympics. You're a really good sport.
Anything else? Councillor B. McGregor.
Just a quick reminder of the budget community open houses starting tomorrow night. So tomorrow night's the Ken Houston Memorial Agricultural Center in Dresden, as well as the Tilbury Arena. Wednesday's Blenheim High School cafeteria and the Wallsburg Municipal Office. And Thursday is at the Active Lifestyle Center here in Chatham.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a quick kind of sad note, but really it's not all that sad. This weekend, Chatham lost one of our citizens, 100-year-old Mr. Jim Fisher. Jim's a national treasure, a local guy. I met him playing tennis when he was taking the sport up in his 80s, and we played throughout his 90s, if you can believe it, many, many, many times. And some may recall seeing a license plate around town that said DD Juno. So Jim, in World War II, landed at the Juno Beach on D-Day, was a gunner in a tank, and stayed in the tank for years until Berlin. So this guy was an incredible man, and would tell you all about it too, which is not exactly common, right? But those are pretty entertaining conversations. And I was at his birthday about almost exactly a month ago, and he was in his living room on his 100th birthday. And he just died on the weekend, and just a really great guy and a hero. He spoke to kids at schools and was a real example at the tennis court. You know, here's this guy, he's like 93. So, you know, you tried to hit the ball to Jim. You didn't want to make Jim run for the ball, but still, like, he was out there. So, yeah, just in honor of his life, because he's a great guy. And another sort of interesting thing, he took his grandson to, like, maybe the 75th anniversary of D-Day at the beaches in Juneau, and the Canadian tour guide said, oh, and this is a list of the names, and he said, well, that's me. And they were just blown away that, look, that's you. So they treated him very well. And he just kind of told me that story kind of flippantly. So really great guy, and sad to see him go, but great life lived. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? Councillor C. McGregor.
Just when we get through the non-agenda items, I would like to move the approval of the communication items. Did we?
Councillor Scotchy.
Just one quick note. I did hear of a company here in Chatham called Bright Smiles Community Dental Hygienist, and they did a real big initiative when they've helped some people from Habitat for Humanity in regards to giving them some free dental care, as well as I've heard they've did it for several youths that haven't been able to quite afford to get their teeth cleaned. And I don't know the business personally, but I heard about the initiative, and I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the community.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. And to Tilbury, Wheatley, and Merlin, to the Snow Angels that were out this weekend doing a heck of a lot of shoveling for their first time. I'd like to thank them all very much, and for the patience of the homeowners that I know some of the teenagers have to work and have other priorities as well. So I thank them for their patience, but I really thank all my young men and women and that volunteer for the Snow Angels in Merlin, Tilbury, and Wheatley that come out and do the job that a lot of people don't want to do. Thank you.
Thanks. Reading of the bylaws. First reading, second reading. Councillor Solomon. Councillor C. McGregor. All in favor? Opposed? Council go to committee and resumption of council. Third and final reading. Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Resolution of council.
Thank you. And I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, February 11th, 2019, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
That's a wrap. Oh.